Welcome to Late Night Story. When the world goes silent and shadows stretch longer, some stories awaken, whispered only to those still awake. So put on your headphones, turn down the lights, and let me guide you through the quiet hours. If you're listening alone, you're exactly where you need to be. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world, don't forget to subscribe before you drift too far into the dark.
Story 1. My family has a rite of passage where we drive down a specific highway. I just found my grandfather's journal, and now I know it's not a tradition, it's a curse. The men in my family have a tradition, a rite of passage, my dad called it. When a boy becomes a man, he takes a journey in my grandfather's car, a cross-country trip, alone to connect with the past. My grandfather died before I was born, so for me, it was supposed to be a way to connect with the man I never knew, a way to understand my roots. Now I think it was a test, and I don't know if I passed or failed. The car itself is a relic, a 1968 Ford Falcon, a heavy beast of seafoam green steel and chrome. The inside smells of old vinyl, stale pipe tobacco, and something else, something faintly metallic and sad. Like old blood, there's no GPS, no Bluetooth, no screen of any kind. Just a rumbling engine, a steering wheel the size of a ship's helm, an old AM/FM radio with a single crackling speaker in the dash. I set off 2 weeks ago, with a worn paper map unfolded on the passenger seat beside me. The first few days were incredible. Just me, the open road, and the ghosts of old rock and roll on the radio. It was the time for me to go through the road. Looking at the map, I saw it. A thin, red line designated a state highway that cut a perfectly straight 200-mile slash through a vast, dark green patch of national forest. The turnoff was unassuming, just a faded green sign pointing down a two-lane blacktop that was immediately swallowed by a canopy of ancient, towering pine trees. The air grew cooler. The sunlight dimmed, filtered through the dense needles overhead. Within 10 minutes, I hadn't seen another car. The road was a lonely, empty ribbon unfurling into the wilderness. That's when the radio started acting up. At first, it was just static, the familiar hiss of a signal lost distance in geography. But then, through the static, a voice crackled to life. It was a news anchor, his voice crisp and urgent, talking about naval blockades and tensions in Cuba. The broadcast lasted for about 30 seconds, then dissolved back into static. Weird. I twisted the dial, but all I got was more hissing. A few miles later, it happened again. A jingle, upbeat and cheerful. For a brand of soda I vaguely remember my parents talking about, one that hadn't been on shelves since the 70s. I dismissed it as atmospheric bounce. I'd heard of it happening in remote areas, radio waves from God nowhere, trapped in the ionosphere, sometimes bouncing back down in just the right conditions. It was a strange atmospheric quirk, a cool story to tell later. But the broadcasts kept coming, and they started to change. They became more intimate. I heard the hushed, whispered conversation of two young lovers, their words full of nervous excitement. I heard a mother humming a lullaby, a gentle, wordless tune full of so much love it made my chest ache. I heard a heated argument between two men, their voices sharp and angry, though I couldn't make out the words. They weren't broadcasts anymore. They something else. The feeling in the car shifted from curiosity to a low, humming unease. The road stretched on, empty and unchanging. Then, up ahead, I saw a building. It was an old, dilapidated diner. Its sign faded and peeling, its windows boarded up. It looked like it had been abandoned for half a century. As I drove past, the radio erupted. It wasn't a voice this time. It was a cacophony of sound. The clatter of cutlery on ceramic plates, the sizzle of the grill, the low murmur of conversation, and over it all, the clear, cheerful voice of a waitress asking, "What'll it be, hun?" It was so real, so vibrant, I could almost smell the greasy spoon coffee. It lasted for the 10 seconds it took to pass the diner, and then it vanished. replaced by the familiar hiss of static. My heart was pounding. That wasn't some physical phenomena. A few miles later, I passed a wide clearing with a single massive, gnarled oak tree in the center. As the car drew level with it, the radio crackled again. This time, it was a sound of children laughing, pure, unadulterated joy. And underneath it, the steady, rhythmic creak, creak, creak of a tire swing. I looked at the tree. There was no swing, just a thick, heavy branch, empty against the gray sky. The realization hit me hard. The radio wasn't picking up random signals from the sky. It was picking them up from the ground, from the road itself. It was playing back moments, memories, that had happened in the exact locations I was passing. This entire desolate stretch of highway. It was a recording, and this car, my grandfather's car, was the playback device. A morbid curiosity, stronger than my fear, took hold. I started to experiment. I slowed the car to a crawl. I passed an old, collapsed barn, its roof caved in, its timbers rotting. The radio filled with a frantic, desperate voice of a man praying, begging for mercy as the sound of a roaring thunderstorm raged around him. The storm wasn't real. The sky above me was a flat, overcast gray, but in the car, I could almost feel the thunder shake my bones. I stopped the car completely. The prayer faded. I put it in reverse, backed up 10 feet. The prayer started again mid-sentence. I was controlling it. I was scrubbing through the timeline of this place. The initial wonder of it began to curdle into something much darker. The memories weren't all picnics and laughter. They couldn't be. Up ahead, the road curved sharply around a deep, rocky ravine. A rusty, mangled section of guardrail was the only sign of trouble. As I approached, a knot of ice formed in my stomach. I almost turned the radio off. I couldn't. The static gave way to the screech of tires on wet pavement. It was a horrifying, high-pitched squeal of rubber losing its grip. It was followed by a single sharp, female scream, a sound of pure, final terror, cut off abruptly by a sickening crunch of metal on rock. And then silence, a profound, heavy, listening silence that was worse than the scream itself. I felt physically cold. The dread wasn't just in my head anymore. It was a physical sensation, seeping into me from the old vinyl of the seats, through the steering wheel into my hands. This wasn't just a recording. The emotions were real. The pain, the fear, the joy, they were imprinted here. I had to get out, just for a minute. I pulled the car over onto the gravel shoulder, my hands shaking. I needed fresh air. I needed to escape the claustrophobic intimacy of these ghosts. I killed the engine, and the silence was a relief. I sat there for a long time, just breathing. My eyes scanned the simple, primitive dashboard, the glove compartment. I don't know why I opened it. Maybe I was just looking for a distraction. Inside, beneath a stack of old gas receipts and a tire pressure gauge, was a small, leather-bound journal. It was my grandfather's. His name was embossed in faded gold on the cover. With trembling fingers, I opened it. The pages were filled with his neat, looping handwriting. The first few entries were about the car, about his love for driving. Then, the entries started to be about this road. October 12th, 1971 started my rite of passage today. A state highway that cuts through the old forest. The map calls it Route 9, but it feels older than that. There's a strange quality to the air here. The radio keeps picking up old signals, like echoes. I must be coming back this way. October 15th, 1971 is not echoes. It's the road. I've started calling it the hollow. It holds on to things, voices, moments. I passed the old Miller farm today and heard old man Miller yelling at his son. Clear as day. Miller's been dead 20 years. This road, it remembers. I flipped through the pages. The entries became more frequent, more obsessive. He was driving the road regularly, listening, cataloging the memories he found. He was as fascinated as I had been. But then, the tone of the final entries changed. The neat cursor became a frantic, almost illegible scrawl. September 3rd, 1992, I was wrong. I was a fool. The road doesn't just play back. It records. It takes. I was out here last week after a terrible fight with my wife. I was so angry, so full of rage. Today, I drove past the same spot, and I heard it. I heard myself. I heard my own words, my own anger, echoing back at me from the static. It took a piece of me. It recorded my pain, and now it plays it back. Any strong emotion, any peak of human experience, it gets imprinted. It feeds a hollow. The last entry was written on a page that was tear-stained and smudged. September 5th, 1992, it's our blood. It has to be. I found the old county records, the ones they keep in the church basement. This land wasn't empty. Before it was a forest, before it was a road, it belonged to a tribe. Our ancestors, when they first settled this valley, they cleared them out. That was the phrase in the old letters. Cleared them out. It wasn't a treaty. It wasn't a sale. It was a slaughter, a genocide. We built our lives on their graves. And this road cuts right through the heart of their burial ground. It's not just playing back memories. It's playing back their suffering. An endless loop of their final agony. And it's a curse. For us. For our bloodline. The car, this damn car, it's an amplifier. It attunes us to their pain. This rite of passage. It isn't about connecting with us. It's about binding us to them, to their suffering. The road demands a witness from the bloodline of the usurpers. It demands we listen. I dropped the journal. My blood had turned to ice. The rite of passage, the connection to the past. It was all a lie, a beautiful, romantic story to cover up a horrifying, ugly truth. I looked up into the rearview mirror. The road behind me seemed to shimmer, the image of the forest wavering like a heat haze. The car, which had been running perfectly, suddenly sputtered. Cough. The engine died. The radio crackled to life. But it wasn't a memory this time. It was a low, expectant hum, a waiting sound. And in the mirror I saw them, far behind me, where the road met the horizon. Figures began to appear, dozens of them, then hundreds. They were on horseback, dark, wrathful silhouettes against the gray sky. They began to ride toward me, moving with an unnatural speed. They were screaming, a sound that came not through the radio, but through the very air, a chorus of rage and pain in a language I didn't know but understood perfectly. I looked to the sides of the road, to the forest I had thought was empty. It wasn't empty anymore. Figures were stumbling out from between the trees. Women, children, old men. Their bodies were torn and mutilated. Their faces were masks of unending agony. And they were all looking at me. They weren't just ghosts. They were accusations. They were raising their spectral, broken hands, pointing at me, their mouths open in silent screams that I could feel in my soul. My own scream was a raw, terrified sound. I turned the key in the ignition, praying. The engine caught, roaring back to life. I stomped on the accelerator, and the old Falcon fishtailed on the gravel before finding purchase on the asphalt. I flew down that road, the army of spectral riders gaining on me in the rear-view mirror, the suffering faces of the dead flashing past my windows. The road ahead seemed to stretch into infinity. The car rattled and shook, pushed to its absolute limit. The humming from the radio grew louder, more intense, a sound that felt like it was trying to shake my skull apart. I saw a sign up ahead, a modern, reflective green sign for the interstate, the end of the hollow. I shot past it, crossing some invisible line, and everything stopped. The riders in my mirror vanished. The figures in the woods were gone. The humming from the radio cut out, replaced by a profound, deafening silence. I kept driving for another mile before pulling over, my body shaking so violently I could barely control the car. I sat there, gasping for air, the silence a welcome blanket. Then, the radio crackled one last time. It was a voice, an old man's voice, full of a weariness so deep it felt ancient. It was a voice I'd never heard, but I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to bone, that it was my grandfather. "Now you know," he whispered, his voice a ghost in the machine. "Now you carry it, too. The road remembers. The road always remembers. And one day, son, for one of us, for one of our blood, it won't be enough to just listen. One day it will claim its payment. The radio went silent, and I was alone. But I know I'm not. I can still feel it. A cold spot in my soul. The rite of passage is complete. I've connected with my ancestors, and I am now bound to their crime, a witness to their sin, just waiting for the day the road decides it's my turn to become another one of its recordings. Story 2. My dead dog came back to say goodbye. He wasn't alone. Vigo was with me for over 10 years. I got him when I was a sophomore in high school. I still remember bringing him home, a little boxer puppy in my arms. A year after graduating, I moved out of my parents' place to live with a couple friends, and he stayed with my parents while I lived in a 3-bedroom apartment that didn't allow pets. Eventually, one of my roommates met a girl. They hit it off and moved in together. My remaining friend and I moved into a bottom floor 2-bedroom apartment. It was in a smaller, nicer complex that allowed pets, and I was finally able to have Vigo live with me. He lived with me for 6 years before his illness started catching up to him. Vigo started developing heart conditions 2 years before he passed. At first, he would lay down at random moments during a walk. Then I started noticing he would pass out suddenly while at home. Exercise soon became something he could no longer do. It broke me to see him slow down when he got older. He was always such an energetic dog. Vigo passed away suddenly while at home. I was well aware this could happen due to his pre-existing condition, but as much as I told myself I was ready, it is hard to imagine how you'll feel before it happens. He passed Sunday morning. The rest of the day was rough for me, and I couldn't bring myself to move his things. In order to try to distract myself, I still went to work on Monday and the rest of the week. I definitely overworked myself that week, all while dreading the upcoming weekend. The first whole weekend I would spend without Vigo. My roommate, Zeke, noticing I was running on little sleep just by glancing at me, offered me some weed before he went out Friday night. As usual, I declined the offer. I'm in a minority nowadays, but I've never been the biggest fan of smoking weed. I much prefer to have a drink. Come on, Tom, come along with us. Invite your girl, Emily. Zeke urged me again before walking out. She's actually working late tonight. She said she'll come over tomorrow morning. I'm just gonna try to get some rest for now. I said, laying on the living room sofa and watching TV while he opened the front door. Well, suit yourself. Oh, and if you change your mind, you know where my stash is. I still got some pre-made joints I made yesterday. It'll help you sleep and likely put you in a better mood. Zeke said before walking out the door, shutting and locking it behind him. It was past midnight when I finally got up from the living room couch and headed to my room. Vigo's bed and empty bowls greeted me when I walked in. He had slept in my room ever since he moved in with me. All his things were still laid against the left wall of my room, as if he were still around. "Good night, buddy," I said out loud. I then laid down on my bed and closed my teary eyes, trying to go to sleep. I gave up after tossing and turning for over an hour. Getting up, I walked over to Zeke's room and was greeted by a certain smell when I walked in. Zeke is most definitely a stoner who will dabble into other drugs, but only on occasion. He doesn't let weed interfere with his life, and usually only smokes at home. Whatever I smelled in his room, though, that was not weed. It was a musty smell, and if I asked him about it, I'm sure his answer would start with, "I know a guy." Inside his room, I walked his dresser on the far wall and opened the third drawer on the left. A medium-sized wooden tea box was tucked in the back of the drawer. I pulled it out, accidentally spilling a few of its contents, and set it on his bed as I opened it. There were various strains to choose from, all organized and labeled separately in small glass jars / Ziploc bags and in different compartments. I pulled out the 2 bags that contained pre-made joints, looking for any that might draw my attention, also picking up everything I spilled as I did so. The contents of 2 of the 8 compartments had almost completely spilled out. One of the near-empty sections had 2 joints in another Ziploc bag that caught my eye, revealed only after spilling everything that happened to be sitting on top. Some of the herbs inside them had a dark blue hue about them. My favorite color is blue. I thought to myself before pulling one out of the bag, making my decision like a child choosing his favorite toy or candy. I held the joint in one hand, putting the box away with the other. Grabbing the lighter and ashtray from Zeke's nightstand, I walked back to my bedroom. I opened my bedroom window to air out the weed that was about to stink up my room. After lighting it, I immediately noticed it did not smell like normal weed. I still held it up to my lips and inhaled a few times. My lungs burned. I started coughing and choking also because of the smell the smoke produced. It smelled like weed, but also burnt plastic, specifically like a shoe store that caught fire. The taste wasn't half bad. It was a little sweet. Holy shit, I said, trying to fan out the smoke with my other hand. I stuck my head out the window before taking another huff. What are you doing? I thought to myself before walking to the ashtray and putting it out. I continued coughing for a few minutes before turning off the lights and laying back in bed. The smell was still prevalent, but I was starting to feel very relaxed, very mellow and at peace with myself. I'm not sure when I fell asleep. I only noticed I passed out when something woke me up. A moist sensation ran up my arm. I assumed it was Vigo licking my arm and upper hand. Licking was a habit he developed in his old age. It was a means to let me know he needed to go outside to relieve himself. He did this almost every night. I petted his head, not yet fully aware that I was touching my live again dead dog. Need to go outside, boy? I said to him before opening my eyes. I then registered what was going on, jolted out of bed, and turned on the lights. The room now illuminated revealed that it was my dog, only he looked different. I was shocked. Vigo looked at me happily, using his whole body to wag his tail, something he hadn't done in a long time. Vigo, hey boy, what are you doing here? I said, slowly getting closer and kneeling down to pet him. He was as happy as can be, leaning up against me and jumping around while I rubbed and patted his back. From up close, I could see his coat had a darker hue and more shine to it. This was my dog, just younger somehow. I held his head up to mine and saw the fur on his face was back to brown and black. His last couple years, I had given him the nickname Little Ghostface due to the white hairs that had accumulated on his head. He really did look like he was wearing a mask. I estimated this was a Vigo from at least 5 years ago. My dog was back in his prime, both happy and healthy. After playing with him for a while, I looked around and tried to find anything else that seemed out of place or odd. I had to be dreaming, but everything felt so real. I looked out the window and saw that it was still completely dark out. The clock on my nightstand read that it was 2:20 a.m. I had only slept for 15 minutes at most. It felt like I had been out for hours. Where'd you come from, buddy? I then asked, looking at him attentively. Vigo acted like his normal younger self for a few minutes before walking over to my closed bedroom door and scratching at it. What is it? You actually want to go outside? I asked him. He continued scratching at the door before excitedly letting out a high-pitched screech that answered my question. I walked over and opened the bedroom door. Vigo took off towards the living room. I assumed he was waiting by the door, but through the darkness I could see he was on his hind legs, leaning his front paws on someone who was sitting on the sofa. I then turned on the lights and instantly saw it wasn't Zeke. This person was facing away from me towards the TV. The back of their head was shaved and they had big, hoop-like earrings. Hello, I said. Who are you? No response from the mysterious figure who was steadily petting my dog. Vigo was very happy to see this person. It was obvious he knew her, and I had no idea how. Oddly enough, I wasn't afraid, and proceeded to walk toward them, talking and asking more questions as I got closer. Never seen you before. Are you Zeke's friend or something? I asked, walking over and around the sofa. My dog looked at me and wagged his tail when I neared. From up close, I could tell it was a woman with a completely shaved head dressed in strange garments. She had a loose-fitting tan dress that almost matched her skin tone. It looked like it was torn to shreds with many threads and pieces of the dress hanging off all over. She didn't look homeless. What she wore looked ancient, like something some old civilization once wore. The lady gave me a soothing sense of calmness. Her gold earrings glowed with the minimal amount of light the ceiling bulbs produced. She smiled at me, or at least she would have if she had a face. She somehow looked familiar. There was a void where her face should have been, yet she looked like someone I had seen before. There was a protruding portion in the middle of her face that looked to be a snout. Despite having almost no facial features and not saying a single word, she seemed to convey exactly what she was here for. I knelt down when my dog came back to me after having been on her lap. Vigo spun and jumped at me excitedly, almost pushing me against the wall. I got up and he did the same. Standing on his back legs, he stretched his body up against mine. He held his head up and looked at me. I hunched to be face to face with him, petting him while he stood. He seemed to calm down for a second. Not sure how I knew, but this was it. His farewell. He gave me one last happy screech and licked my face. Clearly told to do so, Vigo jumped off me before the mysterious lady stood up. She then faced my way and nodded her head once. I respectfully did the same. The lady never took a single step. She seemingly just hovered over the front door and went straight through it. My dog followed her up to the door and waited. Looking over to me, Vigo wanted me to open the door for him. I walked over, unlocked, and opened the door. What I saw was beautiful. It was some kind of vehicle, glistening and shining just like her earrings. She was inside waiting for my dog. Vigo ran over to it, whatever it was. He looked over to me for a brief moment and then stepped inside. I could still see them, sitting within, through what I can only describe as windows. The whole thing seemed to shine even brighter for a brief moment, and then suddenly began to move forward. It wasn't until they had begun to move that I saw they had a third passenger. It seemed to be another canine. It looked out toward me from back window, and I immediately recognized him. My childhood dog. He passed away when I was 5. It was Cooper. His curly white fur and eraser pink nose were unmistakable. I smiled, for in that moment I felt truly happy. My girl woke me up the next morning asking why the front door was unlocked, would have been burning, and why I was sleeping on the living room couch. I looked around myself while I still sat on the couch. Had that really happened? I asked myself. Emily had found a joint in my room. There was no point in lying to her about having smoked something besides weed, which she was very obviously against. It didn't take a regular smoker to know that what I had smoked was something else. She opened all the windows in our apartment to air out the smell, about me sleeping on the couch. I told her it had gotten hot in my room after smoking and walked out to get some fresh air. I told her I had forgotten to lock the door before sitting on the couch and falling asleep. Zeke had crashed at a friend's house that night and got home after noon. Emily reprimanded him and demanded to know exactly what I had smoked last night. He laughed when he saw the bag that still had the other joint and said it was changa. Neither of us knew exactly what that meant. Emily looked it up and asked me if I had any hallucinations. I lied, of course, and noticed Zeke looked at me with a slight grin. He knew I was lying. I never told her what I saw that night, but I know it did me good and gave me closure. Emily was obviously upset at Zeke, but she and I actually had a good weekend. I eventually told Zeke what I saw. He was intrigued, especially because the herb blend also contained a high amount of blue lotus. Never go digging around in my stash again. If you want some of it, I'll give it to you personally, he said before reiterating that there are positives and negatives to taking most drugs and hallucinogenics. They have their place in moderation. I remember he said in standard Zeke fashion. That was a few weeks ago, and I thought about what I had hallucinated fondly up until yesterday. I accompanied Emily to the funeral and burial of her dear Aunt Angela. Emily has a big family, and the funeral home was packed. I looked around, surprised at the amount of people that showed up. It didn't take long for me to notice it. I saw a similar entity amongst the crowd, more humanoid with no snout and of male composition. He moved past everyone, his torn and shredded robe flowing in non-existent wind. No longer under the influence. This time I was afraid. The specter stood by her casket. His ancient bracelet seemed to illuminate his surroundings. His faceless form looked at me no matter where I moved. It took all of me to stay calm. He was also present during her burial. He showed up riding one of those things. There were other occupants. I recognized a few of them from old photo albums of Emily's family. Angela was present during her own funeral. None of her relatives could see her. Only I. She smiled at me. I then saw her walk over to the glistening craft. I saw her hop on board. I saw him take her away. Story 3. If you find a painting of your childhood home, do this before it ruins your life. That's my childhood home. I wasn't turning down the street I grew up on. I wasn't standing near the large oak in the front yard of the house where I'd lost all my baby teeth. I wasn't sitting inside the kitchen where on my 15th birthday I accidentally dropped the cake my mom had baked, which made my family laugh so hard that we shed tears. No, I was holding an oil painting at a Goodwill on the other side of the country. That can't be possible, my husband said. It can be possible, Parker, because I'm holding the flipping painting and telling you. 1, language. 2, can I say something without you jumping down my throat? Parker asked, his voice even. Yes, I said. Is there an outside chance that this just looks like your childhood home? I mean, you grew up in the burbs. A lot of cookie-cutter homes, no? I hated to admit he had a point, but as I stared at the house, I couldn't come around to that line of thinking. This was my house. Hell, the roses in the flower beds were the same size and color as I remembered them. No, I mean, I hear you and you're not off base. But, dude, this is my house. I pointed at the porch. I broke that railing trying to do a ballet spin and fell into the bushes. You, Miss Two Left Feet, Senorita Trips a Lot, tried to do a ballet spin. To be fair, I did the spin. I just didn't stick the landing. A minor detail in the world of dance. The landing part. I landed on the bushes right here. I said, pointing to the painting, hold on, I have to send a photo to my mom. Does she have old house photos? Of course she does. You've met her, right? I had Parker hold the painting and snapped a few pictures. I sent them over to Mom and asked if she had a photo to compare it to. The message came back a minute later. OMG, that's our house. Weird. Another ding brought us a house photo. It looked exactly like the artwork in my hand. I showed Parker. Christ, he said. That's it. Told you. That's wild. Is it a print or a real painting? I ran my hand across the art. There was a palpable texture to the brush strokes. Sometimes, a print may have varnish applied to give the impression of brush strokes. This wasn't that. I think this is real, but let me check something else, I said, walking toward a wall of ugly lamps. I turned on a lamp and held the painting in front of the bulb. Some artists will draw the picture first in pencil before painting. Sometimes, you can see those marks when you hold it up to the light. Staring at the oak tree in the painting, I saw graphite streaks underneath. It's real, I declared. Who painted it? A slash of red paint in the corner mimicked a signature, but Parker and I stared at it as if it were written in Minoan linear A. Parker traced the paint with his finger, forwards and backwards. The first name may be George or Jeff. I think George. Look at how it flows. He retraced the letters, and it made sense to me. Okay, what's the last name? Hell if I know. I tried Parker's finger tracing. It felt like I was tracing a line drawn by someone with too much caffeine in their system. These didn't seem like actual letters. Might be Moffat, a soft voice said from behind us. We turned and saw that a Goodwill employee had materialized. She was a short, frail-looking elderly woman with a hairstyle that resembled a well-constructed cumulus cloud in both color and shape. Moffat, I said. I think that's an M, she said, pointing to 2 humps. Then it kind of circles into an O and the double FS. The I and the T are somewhat stylized, I think. Artists being artists. I looked and, yeah, it kind of looked like Moffat. I can see it. George Moffat, you think? I do. Beautiful piece. Don't you think? Yes, I said. It looks exactly like the house I grew up in. I showed her the photo my mom sent. How strange, right? I grew up across the country. Why is this even here? When I was younger, there was a company that would paint your home for you. Painters? Parker deadpanned. Ignore him, I said. He doesn't know how to act in public. She laughed. I understand. I have one just like him at home. That's why he's at home. I laughed. You're teaching and I'm taking notes, ma'am. Anyway, they would come paint portraits of your house. It was a thing for a few years. This looks like one of those. There may be a company name on the back, under the frame. I flipped the painting over and gingerly removed the frame. Sure enough, there was a small, faded sticker that read Cozy Home Portraits Company. There wasn't any other information. I made an impressed noise. Look at that. Have a jumping off point to find out what this is all about. Thank you so much. Marge, thank you. Sorry again for this guy. Marge, please forgive me. You're a gentlewoman and a scholar. Marge leaned into him and nodded at me. You're punching above your weight with her. Kiddo, keep her happy. Parker laughed, wrapped his arm around my hip, and pulled me in for a hug. Marge, that's the best advice I've ever received from a Goodwill employee. If only your barber had given you good advice, you could have avoided that haircut. I burst out laughing. Parker did too. Marge, I hope to grow up to be just like you. You found a guy who can take a joke. That's a start. You guys want to get that, or still debating? I looked at Parker, and he nodded. How can we not get this? Even if it's just for the story. Marge smiled. See, you can learn. Come on, kids. I'll ring you up. When I got home, I immediately began researching the Cozy Home Portraits Company. I had a hard time finding anything. Most of the search results were links to people on Reddit asking the same questions. Apparently, there were a lot of folks like me who were surprised to find their childhood homes immortalized on canvas. One commenter said something that stuck with me. Parker, listen to this, I said, reading the post. My mom says she remembers someone approaching her and asking if they could take a photo so they could paint the house later. She told them no at first, but they said they'd do it for no cost. Mom agreed and assumed she'd get the painting at some point, but she never heard from the company again. What's the next commenter say? This sounds fake, I read. Kind of a dickish response, no? It's Reddit, he said, shrugging. Maybe they just used the houses for inspiration and sold the paintings to commercial houses for reproductions? Then why bother involving the homeowners at all? Maybe to assuage their worries of someone standing outside their home snapping photos of their house? Parker suggested. I mean, anyone could take a photo of our house, and I'd have no idea unless I saw them do it. True, it's weird, I'll grant you, but I think I'm on the right track. Commercial art, Americana stuff, that was to be it. He may have been onto something, but that answer didn't feel right. I couldn't work out the logic. If this company had been around for a while and painted portraits of homes all across the country for commercial sale, why wasn't there any record of them? No stories online, no official business records, no known CEO or list of artists or anyone. Hell, even searching for the name George Moffat didn't yield results. My mind told me there was something off about this. A sense of dread loomed over the whole thing. I let it marinate all day to see if I'd reconsider. Shocking no one, I didn't. I told Parker as much as we got ready for bed. You're reacting that way because of what's happening in the world right now, Parker said, yawning. There are real evil people out there, but they aren't painting pictures. Hitler painted pictures, I said. He gave me a deadpan stare. You know what I mean. I just can't let it go. It's odd. Odd that it was done at all. Odd that it traveled all the way out here. Odd that I found it. Odd stacked on odd stack on odd. Turtles all the way down. What? I said, crinkling up my face. What do turtles have to do with anything? He laughed. Nothing. Just a dumb expression. He yawned again. Why is this bothering you so much? Some random company painted and sold pictures of my childhood house with no one knowing about it. It's odd, he said with a smile. Very. It's just not sitting right with me. Parker yawned for a third time. My melatonin is kicking in here. Get some rest and see how you feel in the morning. Maybe call your mom, see if she has a story to tell. She might know something. He didn't wait for my response. Instead, he rolled over, shut off the lamp, and turned on our sound machine. As digital thunderstorms rolled into our bedroom, I lay down on my pillows but didn't fall asleep. This whole thing smothered my thoughts as much as my weighted blanket did my body. I would call Mom tomorrow, see what she knew, if anything. I heard light snores coming from Parker's direction and sighed. That man could fall asleep even if the house were on fire. I flipped on YouTube, found something to help me sleep, and closed my eyes, or would have, if I hadn't seen our front porch light turn on. A cold touched my brain and froze the rest of my body. The light going off didn't mean a prowler was trying to jimmy open our lock. It could be a bug flying too close to the sensor or a sleepwalking squirrel. Improbable? Sure, but they were better than the alternative. I didn't want to wake Parker, but I also wasn't keen on investigating alone. While I was debating getting out of bed, I heard a noise in the kitchen. That made the decision easy. I elbowed Parker. "What?" he asked, his voice a blend of exhaustion and annoyance. Our front porch light went off. I whispered. "Raccoons tripping the light," he said. "Not worth waking me." "I know, but I heard someone in the kitchen." His eyes zinged open. In a flash, he was on his feet and grabbed the bat we kept near the bed. He quietly inched along the wall until he got to the bedroom doorway. He peeked out and scanned the room before turning back to me and shrugging. I pointed to the kitchen again before popping up and joining him on the wall. Parker wasn't pleased. He told me, not in words but vigorous nods, to go back to the bed and wait. I didn't. He gave in, and we made our way out of the bedroom, me walking directly behind him like some backwards waltz. I saw nothing. That went double after Parker slammed his hand on the switch, flooding the room with light and damn near blinding me in the process. I let out a painful yelp and covered my eyes to adjust. I heard Parker sigh. "We're good," he said. "Nothing in here." "You gotta tell me before you do that," I said, finally checking out the room. Everything initially looked washed out. I'm nearly blind. I wanted the element of surprise. Parker said. "You achieved it," I said. "All I see now are a bunch of little diamonds everywhere." He walked into the kitchen. "Your intruder is nothing more than a fallen salt shaker," he said, holding up the culprit. "Oh." Like I said, a raccoon probably tripped the light. "I'm going back to sleep. You should too." He walked past me, patted my ass, and headed back to bed. I was about to join him when my eyes landed on the painting. I walked over to it and stared. In the store, looking at it flooded my emotions with joy and happiness. But now, none of that. Unease seeped into my blood and rushed through my body. Something was different about the painting. I couldn't put my finger on what had changed, but I knew something had. It was giving me chills. I grabbed a nearby napkin and draped it over the artwork like a coroner covering a dead body. My thinking was that if there was something supernatural about this thing, the napkin would keep it at bay. Dumb, I know, but it made sense at the time. I couldn't believe that picture. That's so wild. Mom was too chipper for this early in the morning. She always was, though, a real rise with the early bird kind of gal. That wasn't me. I still had bedhead as I sipped my cup of coffee. Parker, another early riser, cooked breakfast. I thought so too. Someone told me a company used to go around and paint pictures of homes. They'd ask the homeowners beforehand. Any memory of that? Not that I can remember. Back then, it was mostly your father who spoke with salesmen. I found them unseemly. I can't imagine he'd allow someone to do that. Rest his soul. Yeah, Dad was pretty private. We had a neighbor who was a painter, though. Carl. No, that wasn't it. Craig. Goddamn my ancient brain. Bonnie, don't get old. It's hell. I'm trying not to. It's why I do my nightly skincare routine. It's intense, Parker added with a smirk. What was his name? It's been years since I thought of him. Craig Morris? Something like that. He didn't live near us for long. Dad didn't like him. At all. Why? Craig was the human equivalent of a popcorn kernel stuck in your teeth. Irritating. He rubbed your father the wrong way. I don't remember Dad talking about him. He didn't around you, but with me, hoo boy. Craig used to walk by the house all the time, always whistling Pop Goes the Weasel for some reason. He'd stand too close when he talked to you. He'd leer at me when I was outside, hanging laundry on the line. He'd never get the hint that I wanted to be left alone, even though I was always short with him. Especially after he said that you were growing up nicely. Gross, I said. I was 10. Like I said, he was a weirdo. But again, most artiste types are, I suppose. Remember your Uncle Walter? Made those ghastly papier-mâché skulls. They used to be all over his house. Was like walking into some cannibal's hut whenever we go over there, but he was good at making them. Who'd want them is another thing altogether. He gave us one, and I made your dad keep in the bag in garage. Don't bring that ghoulish shit in my house. As my mom rambled about skull shapes like a Victorian phrenologist, a thought came to me. I looked down at the painting and traced the painter's name. Mom, could his name have been Craig Moffat? Parker looked over at me. I nodded down at the painting and traced what I thought the letters were with my finger. He hit his forehead with a spatula and shook his head. Oh my God! Yes, that was it. Craig Moffat. God, what a blast from the past. He really was a weird little freak of a man, my mom said, laughing. He used to wear these tiny little shorts, and he did not have the legs for it. Looked like two toothpicks stuck in an orange. Mom droned on a little longer, but provided nothing of substance beyond Craig Moffat's horrid legs. But she'd given me some new information, the artist's real name. As soon as I hung up, I grabbed my laptop. Craig Moffat, not George. Craig. I see it now, Parker said. We should have never trusted Marge. Didn't like the cut of her jib. Babe, her jib was flawless, I said, turning to the painting. Her eyes, not so much. To be fair, we all agreed it was George Moffat. There's Craig Moffat. I turned the computer around and showed a web page dedicated to his art. Parker leaned down to get a closer look. His legs did look like toothpicks stuck in an orange. Rolling my eyes, I turned the laptop back to me and clicked on the man's About Me page. It was illuminating. Craig had quite the little career. He'd worked for a few newspaper outlets, a few magazines, some ad campaigns. His stuff was good. There was a list of known works. There are a few house paintings listed here. It has to be him. Has anyone mentioned how odd this is? Parker said with a sly smile, It's catching on. Maybe he saw your home as a happy family home and wanted to capture it for that company. Is there a contact page? There is. I yelped. I read the page out loud. If you have questions about Craig or his work, please feel free to reach out here. I said, That's great. You can email him and ask directly. Moffat Estate at moffatart.com. I read, Shit, he's dead. That shouldn't matter. Maybe the guy who runs the estate can answer your questions. I nodded. It was worth a shot. I started composing a message, and Parker went back to breakfast. I glanced at the artwork on the table next to me. Something about it picked at my brain. Hey, I meant to ask, have you been watching professional wiffle ball games on our YouTube? Oh, yeah. I've started turning on games after your melatonin kicks in. Puts me right out. Uh-huh. Are you a wiffle ball fan? No, I said, laughing. I just happened across it one night, and I fell asleep like 10 minutes into a game. It's better than Ocean Waves. Which game was it? Rhinos against the Storks? Oh man, those two teams hate each other. Storks have won the last 3 series behind Dustin Braddock's nasty banana ball. I stopped speaking because I could feel Parker's smug smirk on his face. I looked up and caught it with my own eyes. Not a fan. What the hell is a banana ball? Ping. They emailed back already. I said, what the hell? Maybe there isn't a lot going on at the Moffat estate. Hi. Craig Moffat was my father. He did several pieces of local homes during that era. I would love to discuss this with you. Can we set up a call? So there clearly isn't a lot going on at the Moffat estate, Parker said. I'm going to say yes. I think I have to, if for no other reason than my own sanity. Go for it. I can be there for the call if you need me. So I set up a call with the estate for later that day. Hopefully, there'd be some information that I could use to stop the itch in my brain. Parker served me breakfast before he got ready to head out to the gym. You never told me what banana ball is, he said, placing a plate in front of me. It's a side arm slurve, a strikeout pitch, nearly unhittable if Braddock is on his game. Parker gave me a quizzical look. I sighed. Not a fan. after Parker had left the gym, I went back over to the painting. It was still sitting in the last place I had left it. Still had the napkin over it. The bad vibes I felt earlier were still there. In fact, they'd grown worse. I didn't even want this thing in my house anymore, covered or not. Despite my misgivings, I pulled the napkin off the painting and gave it a once-over. I felt my stomach gurgle, and my throat went dry. Looking at this now literally caused physical pain. It didn't make sense. Where's the front door? I subtly asked myself out loud. The front door of the house was gone, blacked out like an actor with perfect teeth coloring in one to look sufficiently destitute for a role. I scraped where the door had been with my thumb. No fresh paint. It was like it had always been that way, but it hadn't. I checked the photo I sent to my mom to confirm. There was a creak on the basement stairs. There very much shouldn't have been a creak on the basement stairs. The basement was home to nothing but dust, Christmas decorations, and my ugly childhood couches we didn't have a heart to throw away. Since none of those things can walk, this made no sense. I tiptoed to the knife block and pulled out a butcher knife. With my phone in my free hand, I used my nimble thumb to unlock it. I was ready to dial 911. But as I stared at my reflection in the knife blade, I questioned whether I was prepared to stick it into another person. I wouldn't know that until it came to that moment. I very much prayed that wouldn't happen. Another creak, near the top of the stairs now. It was getting closer. I flexed the grip on the knife. I tried to control my breathing, but couldn't. Turns out all that woo-woo TikTok relaxation breathing stuff was just bullshit. My heart was thumping like an angry jazz drummer's long-awaited solo. I felt sweat drip down my neck. Something flickered on the painting. It momentarily took my eyes off the basement door. Like last night, I initially registered nothing different. Then I noticed, through the window of the living room, it looked like someone had turned on a light or lit a fire. Splotches of yellow and orange paint filled the window frame. The jingling of the basement door handle snapped me out of my trance. My palms were sweaty. My legs swayed like bamboo in a strong breeze. I gathered all my remaining strength and yelled out, "Hey, ST, stay away from me." I want to say more, but overwhelming fear shut me up. The jiggling stopped. Relief. My hectoring worked for about 2 seconds. The basement door cracked open. There was a ghostly, pale face staring back at me. That was when my brain firmly decided whether I was a fight or flight kind of gal. I was flight. Fuck this. I dropped the knife, which clattered on the tile like that drummer hitting the hi-hat, and sprinted toward my front door. I yelled gibberish the entire time, tears streaming down my face, and blasted out the door. My fingers hit send on the call, and seconds later, an annoyingly even-keeled 911 operator connected me with the police. Parker returned home before the police arrived. He found me sitting inside my locked car. Before he could crack a joke, he caught sight of my face. I'd been crying and could feel how puffy my eyes were. Consternation crossed his face. I rolled the window down. "Get in the car." He did. I explained everything to him. He was astonished. He was confused. He grabbed my hand and held it steady as I went over everything, pausing occasionally to sob like a child with a skinned knee. When I was done, he asked why I didn't leave right away. "Who do you think you are, Rambo?" I laughed. I need that. For a few seconds, I wasn't. I wasn't even Gizmo pretending to be Rambo. He gave my arm a loving squeeze. "If it'll help you calm down, we can watch some pro wiffle ball tonight. I hear the rhinos are playing the turkeys." "Storks," I said, "but they are actually playing the habaneros tonight." Gil Faust is looking to debut his chili ball pitch. He leaned in and kissed my forehead. "But you're not a fan." "I'm not." A knock on the window caused me to scream. The cops had arrived. If they were curious why we were sitting in our car, they kept it to themselves. I relayed what happened, and they said they'd go into the basement and check it out. 15 minutes later, they came walking out. "We didn't see anyone down there," the cops said. "But to be fair to you, your basement gave me the heebie-jeebies." "Great," I said. "I know it's not what you wanted to hear, but it's the truth. On the plus side, I haven't seen that love seat since I was a kid. Want it? It's better left in the past. You two have a nice day. We watched them leave. Parker turned to me. You okay? No, and I won't be until I go into the basement myself. What? Why? I can't explain. Something is drawing me there. It sounds crazy, I know, but I feel it in my bones. Parker saw the determined look in my eyes. This was going to happen. Had to happen. He sighed. Want to go in first? Yes, I said. Are you actually going to wait for me to go in or follow right behind me? We both know the answer to that. Resuming our reverse waltz, we went back into the house. Once in the kitchen, we stopped near the painting. Parker looked over and agreed that there were changes. We turned our attention to the closed basement door. Parker put his hand on the handle. We don't have to go down here, Bonnie, he said. The cops didn't find anyone. Alive. If there's a ghost in this house, I need to know. If we know, we can remove it. How? I'm still working on that part, I said, but I need to know for certain. I won't feel safe otherwise. I'm inclined to just say yes and move on. Something altered the painting already. Who the hell did that? One issue at a time, I said. He knew he couldn't talk his way out of this. He knew I needed this, and he loved me enough to see it through to the end, even though he was petrified. 2. The skin on his arm had goosebumps as soon as we walked into the kitchen. It felt like Braille to me now, and the only thing it said was, let's not do this. But that feeling in my brain, the one drawing me down there, wouldn't leave. It was stronger now that we were in the home. Something was loose in my house. I knew it in my heart. Whatever it was, I needed to keep it from roosting in my new home. Let the ghosts live in the past. Leave my future alone. Parker gripped the handle, sighed so loudly it was heard 2 towns over, and opened the door. The stairs led down into the dark of the basement. The floor around the landing was the only thing visible. In the abstract, it wasn't anything. Right now, though, horrifying. Parker found the light switch, illuminating the rest of the space. So far, so good. We took our time walking down the stairs, creaking along the wooden stairs one step at a time. Maybe it'd have the same effect on the ghost that hearing creaking steps did on me. Perhaps the phantom was hiding, holding a ghost knife, and deciding if it was going to play Ghost Rambo or just fearfully disappear into the walls. The house and the painting had a basement, too. I whispered. When I was a kid, I hated going down there. Any time of day. Just didn't feel natural, you know? Are you trying to get me to stop doing this? Sorry, I'm rambling, I said. I kept right on rambling, though what bothered me wasn't so much going down there. What scared me was the trip back up. Turning your back on the dark. I used to walk backwards up the stairs. We can try that in a few minutes, Parker whispered back. Any other ghost stories you want to share before we hit the landing? Sorry, I said. It just popped into my mind. I haven't thought about that fear in years. Since we moved away from there, actually, that's not comforting. We got to the bottom and took a look around. Everything looked normal. No surprises. Just our old, ugly furniture and friendly Santa decorations smiling and giving us a frozen wave. I thought about turning and heading back up, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was supposed to be down here. I was also positive Parker would be furious if I went darting up the stairs without him. Leaving him alone in Spook Central might be ground for divorce. We headed over to furniture. There was a layer of dust on everything. I smacked the pillow, sending it flying into the air. I coughed and sneezed, instantly regretting my actions. Parker's withering glare told me he wasn't fond of my actions either. Sorry, I don't see anything out of the ordinary here, do you? No, I said. It looks like it always does. Feeling gone? Can we go back upstairs now? Before I could answer, we heard the familiar chime from our security system, followed by the calm, reassuring voice informing us that our front door was open. What the fuck? I said, "Sure," Parker responded, his finger to his lips. He pointed up to the ceiling. We cocked our ears and concentrated. For about 20 seconds, there was nothing. Silence. It didn't last. Career walk. The floorboards wheezed as someone took slow, deliberate steps above us. You could hear the footfalls as they moved from the front door to the hallway. Trembling, Parker pointed up at the ceiling. You could physically see the floor bow ever so slightly from the person's weight. I didn't even think that was possible. W, what do we do? I whispered. I don't know, Parker said. Maybe they'll leave? A second later, we were cloaked in total darkness. All the power in the house had gone out. The only light came from the sunlight streaming in from the open door at the top of the stairs. It wasn't much, but it was a beacon. Our lighthouse. Our way home. Let's, is all I was able to say. Someone upstairs ran down the hall, through the kitchen, and to the basement door. They slammed it shut, plunging us into instant midnight. I wanted to scream, to yell so loud it'd shake the heavens. But I couldn't. My body physically couldn't make that happen. It'd give away our location. I clutched Parker's shirt so hard I was afraid I'd rip it right off him. If it bothered him, he didn't say, "This sucks," Parker mumbled. Understatement of the goddamn century. Ho ho ho, Merry Christmas. One of our Santa decorations started going off. I nearly peed myself at Santa's sudden arrival. I imagine it would have been the same response I would have had if I had seen him as a kid. Kris Kringle was soon joined by all of our Christmas decorations going off at once. Dozens of laughing Santas, lights flickering off and on, inflatables rising like zombified plastic bags. The noise was deafening, but strangely festive. The strobing lights and the pitch black caused afterimages to dance in my rods and cones. I slammed them shut and silently prayed for this all to end. Someone must have heard because, as quickly as they come to life, they stopped. We stood in the dark, not breathing, not moving. Neither of us knew what to do. Nothing in my life had prepared me for this. I couldn't shake the idea that whatever was coming would be worse than what we'd already experienced. There was a creaking again, and a sudden rushing of blinding sunlight from the top of the stairs. Someone had opened the door. Before we'd get a glimpse, the door slammed shut, and something sprinted down the now dark stairs. I pulled Parker back onto the old love seat. We sat on the edge and kept our heads on a swivel, even though the basement was too dark to see our own hands. We weren't alone anymore. As my fingertips grazed the couch, I realized something. These were originally my parents. My parents got them when I was living in the house from the painting. They were a physical connection between the past and now. Are these what caused my sudden desire to come to the basement? Was I being manipulated by this thing? Could I trust myself at all? That dread feeling I'd had since I brought the painting into our house intensified. I felt in my bones. Deeper even. My aura. My soul. I leaned into Parker's ear and whispered an apology. He didn't vocalize a response, but squeezed my arm. I squeezed back. My body shook, and I couldn't get myself to stop. I wanted to run for the stairs, but that old fear came rushing back. I knew if I ran up those stairs, it'd follow behind me. Something whooshed by us. My hair flowed with it, trailing behind whatever had sprinted past. I nervously dug my fingers into the fabric. We heard the sound of some liquid splattering on the floor across from us. Water? No, heavier than water. A sound that made my guts twist. Soon joined the drips and splashes. Someone started whistling a familiar tune. Pop Goes the Weasel. The Christmas decorations flickered on and shut off. In the brief flash of light, we could make out a figure standing across from us. Craig Moffat. Pop! He screamed as the light strobed. Goes! He screamed again, a foot closer this time. Another foot closer, almost directly in front of us now. The lights flickered again, and his face was right next to mine. A sinister smile as he slowly whispered, Weasel. I felt something wet and slimy rub against my cheek. Parker stood and, surprisingly, swung at Ghost Craig. It didn't find the ghoul, and as the darkness returned, his fist only found the arm of the couch. I heard his knuckles crack and him swear in pain. My ears were the only thing working at that moment, though. I sat frozen, tears streaming down my face. The lights in the house came back on, and I screamed. On the wall across from us, where we had heard the water, the painting was hanging. Only, it wasn't the old house. It was a current house. All the windows and doors were filled with flames. There were two figures on the front lawn. Parker and I, we were both dead. Standing behind our oak tree, watching it all, was Craig Moffat. Parker, let's go. I didn't have to tell him twice. We broke for the stairs and took them 3 at a time until we reached the top. I grabbed the handle and shoved my shoulder into the door, expecting it to hold firm. It didn't. Parker, and I spilled onto our kitchen floor. I scrambled up and practically yanked Parker into the kitchen. I was about to slam the door when I saw Craig Moffat standing at the bottom of the stairs. We locked eyes. My mind flew back to my childhood, a memory stored deep in the folds of my brain. I was sitting on our porch reading a book and heard that damn whistling. Craig Moffat, a Polaroid camera in his hands and portrait photos on his mind. I was afraid he'd stop and take a picture of me. I was right. Even now, I could hear the heavy clunk of the shutter and the whirring of the processing photo as it slid out. He shook it, and as the fog of war slowly dissipated on the photo, he smiled. This way, I won't forget you. I slammed the door shut and urged Parker to grab the car keys. He turned the corner to do so when I heard him sharply yelp in surprise, followed by the squeak of his sneakers on the hardwood and his ass hitting the ground. I ran to him expecting to see Craig, but was stunned by the sight of a living man surrounded by 2 yellow hulks outside my front door. Once my brain processed information, it was clear those men were wearing biohazard suits. It still didn't answer why men in biohazard suits were outside my door, but it cleared up that there were. The suitless man in the middle, though, had a more than striking resemblance to the ghost I'd just seen in my basement, only younger, fuller, fleshy. Sorry to startle you both, the man said, raising his hands in peace. You contacted us about a painting you found. I'm David Moffat. Craig was my father. You got to be shitting me. We were supposed to talk on the phone, I said. Yes, but we were worried things might have progressed too much by then. Tell me, has the door in the painting disappeared yet? How did David turn to his men, call for the extraction team? Turning back to us, he urgently asked, Where's the painting? The basement, I said, but it looks different now. What in hell is going on? Parker asked, Different? Would you say violently different? Our dead bodies on the lawn in the place ablaze, violently different. He nervously turned to where the biohazard-suited men had gone, the experienced extraction team. Parker stood and held my hand. We looked at each other and back at David Moffat. We both cracked, small smiles that turned into chuckles that turned into a laughing fit. I read somewhere that mental breaks can start like this. Whatever. I leaned in. David Moffat, the son of your childhood painter neighbor Craig Moffat, himself a ghost that nearly killed us, is standing in our fucking veranda. Parker said, barely able to get the words out between screeching laughter. I mean, what the fuck is this life? Seconds later, a team of armed men in hazmat suits carrying unknown machinery rushed in and headed for the basement. We heard one of them scream, and then the sound of mechanical engines warming up. David nodded toward the front door. We should go outside. We did. What the hell else were we going to do? Once we were outside, David pulled out a pack of cigarettes and offered us one. We both declined. David indulged and nodded back at the house. This is the experienced team. What's going on? I asked. I'm going to level with you. What I'm about to say is pretty weird. I like to say weird to people. Sets the right tone. Sir, on what is easily the weirdest day in not only my and my wife's life, but I'd argue humanity's life, nothing you can say will top what we've already been through, Parker said. I mean, I just discovered my wife watches professional wiffle ball. For God's sake. Not a fan. I mumbled. Dad was a strange man. Lots of demons. When he could keep them at bay, he did great work. But that was never for long. Around the time when you were a kid, he got deep into the occult. It was a faddish, passing fancy at first. But soon he found a deeper meaning in it. It consumed him. Around this time, well, he conjured a demon. I think I'm having a stroke. He made a deal. We don't exactly know the details. But what we do know is that Dad agreed to start a company that would paint portraits of people's homes. The twist was that the homes he picked would become targets for the demon. Naturally, Parker said, because why not? He'd take a photo of the home and give it to the demon. The demon would curse it and insert it into the canvases of my dad's paintings. These photos would be a connection between the subjects in the art and the demon itself. The pull got stronger when the artwork found its way back to the subjects. Then he trailed off. Meet each other? I said, in a manner of speaking, yes. So many questions bounced around my brain. This all sounded so outlandish, and yet the memory of the photo came back to me. This way I won't forget you, I said out loud. Confused, Parker looked at me. What? We don't know how many paintings Dad did during this time, but we recovered 65 in locations from New York to California. The people selected seemed to be random, except for you. Why me? My guess? You were neighbors, and, my dad really didn't like your dad. The feeling was mutual. Just then, the extraction team came rushing out. One was limping. The machines they brought looked broken, but the lights were still on. One of them had the painting in a biocontainment bag. It was smoking. The experienced team, David said, ashing out his smoke on the bottom of his shoe and pocketing the butt. Thank you for letting us help rid you of this menace. The work is exhausting, but my family has to atone for Craig's wicked actions. David nodded and turned to leave. I reached out and grabbed his shoulder. Wait, that's it? We're free? Just like that. Just like that, he said. Turning to leave, he stopped and spun on his heels. Unless you have something from the old house in your new house, then you kind of sort of leave a back door for the demon to return. So if you do, I suggest destroying it. He tipped his cap and left. Parker and I locked eyes. The fucking love seat, we said at the same time. My back hurt just thinking about hauling it up those narrow stairs. Later that night, we torched the sofa in a makeshift fire pit in our backyard. We ate pizza and watched the flames consume the potentially demonic couch. Can't imagine that's a sentence that's been said a lot in history. As we did, relief filled my heart. The dread was gone. I looked over at Parker and smiled. I think we can put to bed the argument about who had the weirder childhood, Park. He laughed. Yeah, summers with my Amish family can't compete with demons. His phone buzzed. He looked down at the notification with concern. I felt my stomach twist. Please tell me it's good news. The Rhino/Habaneros game is about to start. I set a reminder. Want to watch? I touched my heart and felt pure happiness surge through me. Tears. Grabbing his free hand, I held it tight and gave it a big squeeze. I have something to confess, I said. I think I'm a legitimate fan of professional wiffle ball. I know, babe. I know. We sat together, letting the crackling of a burning demon couch and the crack of a wiffle ball bat fill the night air. I snuggled into Parker's shoulder. It was warm, inviting. Home, and not one haunted by an angry ghost. How did one girl get so lucky? Story 4. My girlfriend has a strange new hobby. My girlfriend has a strange new hobby, and I am getting close to sounding the relationship's alarms and ending things. We've been together for 7 years. For 3, she attended nursing school while I lifted the financial burden to keep us going. Then she did the same for me while I furthered my education. We both work in the same hospital, though our shifts rarely overlap. We are financially stable and in great place emotionally, until the last few weeks. Why am I telling you our background? For 2 reasons. First, I'm trying to convey that we are normal, responsible adults. We have been through everything together, and a relationship like this isn't thrown away because of a weird hobby that developed over the last few weeks, right? The second is to explain that the nature of our jobs is one that requires a deep desensitization to blood gore, and things that the general public perceives as gross. This is important. Prior to 4 weeks ago, our life ended a monotonous but common synchronized schedule of an adult couple. We function like clockwork, aligning work, family, friends, meals, sleep, and exercise without a thought. There wasn't much change in our day-to-day events, but we liked it that way. 4 weeks ago, I came home from my shift at the hospital and expected to be greeted by the aroma of dinner on the stove, music playing, and a loving girlfriend. I didn't find any of that. I passed the threshold and found myself smelling and hearing nothing. I called for her, but got no response. I walked to our back door that overlooks our backyard and found her kneeling on the grass, facing away from me. "Babe, everything okay?" I asked, grass crunching under my shoes, an oddly satisfying feeling that I always enjoyed. No response. "Babe." I reached out and touched her shoulder gently. Her head was facing down, back arched, staring at something she held in her hands. She appeared to be lost in a trance, awoken only by my touch. She looked up at me, tears in her eyes that made me melt. However, my eyes went to what was in her hands instantly. Cradled in her too open hand was a relatively large crow, stiff with death, eyes staring forward void of life. Across its chest, beginning below its head, reaching its belly, was an open gash that exposed the bird's intestines through a puddle of blood that pooled beyond my girlfriend's hands and onto our grass. "What?" I began, but she began sobbing. She explained that she had seen the injured bird through the kitchen window. It flapped around endlessly on the yard, and when she went to inspect, she saw a trail of blood and innards. She asked to keep the body in the bathtub or our guest bathroom, so she could inspect the bird's anatomy. That's normal physician curiosity, right? I didn't think so, but I didn't say anything. This was the first of 5 different dead animals that are currently laying in my bathtub. They all have the same opening down their belly, and they're all stiff with death. For days after Crow, I came home to find her on our driveway, holding a dead squirrel. The following week, she ran into our house, asking for help with a dead Yorkie puppy that she saw us get run over during her evening run. Days later, she walked into our house with a dead cat, and 4 nights ago, I came home to find her dragging the corpse of a large stray dog that I had seen sniffing around our trash cans. She looked deranged, unrecognizable even. Her face was blank, emotionless, as she dragged a 60-pound corpse through our sidewalk onto our driveway, leaving a trail of fresh blood behind her. Her hair was wild and messy, giving the image of a savage cavewoman. I ran towards her screaming 100 different questions, but she simply said, "Put it in the bathtub with the others." I figured she is going through some emotional breakdown that's manifesting in a strange way. This isn't unheard of in hospitals. Sure, maybe I was being naive, but I chalked it up to something that can be fixed with a therapist. However, last night, I woke up in the middle of the night. The streetlight crept through our windows, just enough to illuminate the image that has been haunting me every second of my day. My girlfriend, the girl that I have built a life around, the future mother of my children, kneeled over me as I slept on my back. The light illuminated her soulless stare, only a few inches from my face. She ran her finger below my jaw all the way down to my belly. Her fingernail slid slowly, feeling like ice on my skin. I was too frozen to move in that moment. She knelt over me for a few minutes and returned to sleep, rolling onto her side of the bed harshly. When I brought up in the morning, she laughed and dismissed it as if it were the most ridiculous story she'd ever heard. It was clearly a bad dream, she said. Maybe she's right. I'm not sure what to do. I'm afraid that if I wait another few nights, my life may be in danger. But even writing that out about my future wife makes me sick to my stomach. Story 5. Whispers over silent souls. Disclaimer. This part will involve suicidal references, death, and the sensation of being on the edge of your seat. This series as a whole will include cannibalism, suicide, body horror, and much, much more. I hope you do enjoy. I was driving home from work when it happened. For months the radio was talking about World War III. Tensions were high between Russia and the U.S. Rumors of biological warfare and Armageddon. I heard about it all so much now it had grown dull and numb to me. White noise, Just flip the station to something else. Change the channel, tune it out. After a while, you couldn't watch anything without hearing about it. It all seemed pointless and stress-inducing. So I stopped listening, took the blue pill, and kept living my life as if nothing was going on. For some time it worked. I lived life like nothing was happening. "Hey, Tom, you hear what they're saying on the news this morning?" my coworker said. "Nope," I thought. "I don't watch that stuff anymore. It'll give you a headache." "Ah, that's right." He cracked a smirk at me. I wish I could stop watching, but what else is there to worry about? He went on about some sort of bomb threat and negations that were being made, some trade deal going south. I tuned it all out like I did every day now. It came easy to me at this point. "Yeah, that's neat, Greg. Hey, give me a hand with this?" I was trying to get a pallet of overloaded ice bags onto my truck. It needed an extra push. He reared behind the pallet, and we both heaved forward to get it over the hump on my lift gate. "Thanks," I said. "That should be it for me. Don't want to be overweight today." They never check that shit. Once you get to your first stop, you're within DOT regulations anyway. It's the drive there that's illegal. Maybe if I cut back on some weight of my own, I'd take another pallet. I joked. "Cut back on weight? You're practically Rambo," Greg exclaimed. To clarify, I'm 40 pounds overweight for a 6-foot male. But Greg being about the size of the Michelin Man, I probably looked pretty lean to him. I loaded up and set off for my first stop. A liquor store. With the tensions overseas, lately we've seen a spike in liquor store ice deliveries. I'm sure you can guess why. I'd be stopping there myself every few days too if I kept listening to the news. I parked my semi and got out to check in. Entering the store, I waved at the clerk, which I had just seen the day before. "Another pallet of 20-pounders? I asked. "You know it, Tom, same spot." I loaded a pallet of 20s onto my jack and began hauling it to their back cooler. As I and the power jack silently hummed down the towering shelves of booze, I couldn't help but overhear people clamoring in the aisle over from me. Drunk guy number 1. "Better stock up. I hear it'll be any time this week now." Drunk guy number 2. "I ain't dying sober." They both chuckled, clinking bottles into their cart. I tuned it out. Hopeless drunks, I thought. Just turn my ears off. I loaded my ice into the cooler, left them the invoice, and went on to the next stop. People shambled the streets as if they were already dead. The city was quieter than usual, like an old dog preparing for death. Many had left to get out of the concrete jungle that was once a bustling metropolis, leaving their homes empty and desolate. Buildings that once collected happy memories, now collecting layers of dust. Businesses with closed signs hung in their doorways. Though I could tune out the television and radio, I could not escape the ever-looming effects that they produced on the populace. I finished my last stop of the day, another liquor store. Driving back to the terminal, I saw a couple sitting on a park bench clutching each other tightly. One of them was visually sobbing as her body lurched back and forth harmoniously. I winced and kept my eyes on the road. It's really getting rough out here, I thought. Dogs roamed the streets. Their owners seemingly vanished, leaving their companions to fend for themselves. Arriving back at the terminal, Greg was the only one still there. He liked working long shifts, probably his way of coping with the doom and gloom. Opening the loading dock doors, he gave me a wave of approval, and I backed in to unload all my empty pallets. He didn't say much other than a casual, "How'd it go?" Same old, I said, parking my truck. I ran into him one more time when I went to clock out. "I hope they still plan on paying us this week," he scowled. "I'm sure they will, Greg. The drunks still need their ice." Fortunately, punching my time card, I grabbed my bag and headed for the door, turning the handle. Greg stopped me before I could escape his conversational orbit. "You think we'll be all right, man? I mean, people are freaking out over all this crap. My cousin's telling me to head for his cabin up near the Canadian border. Says we ain't got much time left. What do you think, Tom? You got an escape plan?" My escape plan was crawling into a bottle, work up the courage to taste the gun oil at the end of the barrel, before the radiation kills me. That is, if bombs don't pay my shadow on the sidewalk first. Trying not to scare him, I said, "Oh, I don't know. My parents have a place 3 hours out of the cities. Maybe I'll head there." I was not ignorant when it came to the knowledge of nuclear fallout. I've seen the images of Chernobyl victims, the effects nukes had on Hiroshima and Nagasaki during World War II. I don't want the skin falling off. 3-week death that I assumed most would succumb to if this did all pan out. I just ended quick. I thought, though I knew in the back of mind, I couldn't. The strong urge to survive to the very last second that most all humans come equipped with prevents this measure. I pushed these thoughts away and told Greg I'd see him tomorrow. I went home and made the dinner of champions. Pot macaroni and a few cold beers. I woke up the next day, got dressed, ate something and headed to work. Getting into my truck, a 2007 Ford F-150, rusty enough to stick your arm to the fender wall. I quickly turned off my radio as it would turn on each time you started it. Before I could reach the off button, it let out a few alarming words. OMB threats, power outage. I shut off. Resisting the urge to turn it back on, I nervously shifted into drive and headed off for work. As long as I keep with my schedule, I'll be okay. It being a type of coping mechanism at this point. I arrived at work. No one was there. The lights were out and I could not clock in. I wrote my hours down on my time sheet and went to load my truck. When I entered the ice cooler, all the pallets were dripping with dew. It must have shut off a few hours ago. I loaded my truck up, the cooler in my trailer bringing the pallets back to freezing temperature. I set off on my first stop. My route was not showing up as I had no Wi-Fi. I pressed on. I knew my stops by heart as I worked for this company for years. I arrived at Walmart, ready to unload, but no one was there to receive. The whole building was shut down and the parking lot was a ghost town. My mind refusing to bend and break to the reality of the situation at hand. I went on to my next stop. Same story, nobody home, lights out. I went to every stop on my memorized route to find everyone closed except for a small gas station on the edge of town. They were running off a generator, and the only person on staff was the owner. We knew each other. Holland, what's going on? You're the only place on my route that's not closed, I said as I got out my truck. He met my lax attitude and said, everyone's gone. Tom left town, went home, hugging their loved ones. Didn't you hear the news this morning? You know I don't listen to that. It's all gibberish and white lies until it actually happens. Well, I think it's actually happening, Tom. All the news stations are down. We're in a state of emergency. Order to take shelter. You're my only delivery man that showed up today. Hell, I haven't had a single customer. Figured I'd stay open so no one would rob the place. The panic I had been holding in for months now seemed to be tearing at the seams, attempting to boil over. Well, you need any ice? I could only manage to squeak out. No, Tom, I think I'm good. You should probably head home, man. Got any family? Might want to spend some precious time with them. I got my cat, and, well, that's about it. Got some family a few hours north of here, but that's all. Well, I recommend you start headed that way. I got a feeling things won't be so pleasant here for very long. Yeah, Holland, thanks, you take care. I crawled into my cab and headed back to the terminal, my mind in a trance, unable to strand together the series of events unfolding before me. I arrived back at the terminal and began to unload robotically. As I entered our ice freezer, all the pallets were dripping violently, and the floor was wet with water. I unloaded my truck anyway and got set to go home, recorded my hours on my time card. I locked up and got into my truck. About a mile from my house, the tornado sirens began wailing. I reluctantly turned on the radio for the first time since all of this started, a motion I was no longer familiar with. The radio statically crackled to an audible tune. It immediately began playing a heart-wrenching sound on an emergency line, the triple dial tone followed by a monotone voice. Enter immediately. This is not a drill. The following tri-state areas are under immediate duress. Find shelter. Ensure you have heat. Stock up on supplies. Seek shelter immediately. This is not a drill. Air. The radio cut out, and then my engine, with the sirens sung their last song and reeled down to a quiet slumber. I came to a chugging halt a few blocks from my house. I sat there momentarily, white knuckles gripping my steering wheel. I hadn't seen another car on the road all day. I could no longer go through the motions. I could no longer ignore the elephant in the room. Frozen, I sat there, waiting for nothing. I looked up into the sky, which had gone from a cool natural blue to a dark gray cloud that engulfed the entire horizon. This is it, I thought. The jig is up, the game is over. My judgment day has come. Urging my stiff body to move, I finally unbuckled my seatbelt, jerked the door open, and stepped out with a bold stride. No door alarm sounded. My truck was dead quiet, as was I. Taking heavy steps, I marched towards my house, determined to continue my regiment lifestyle. My work boots thudding on the concrete before me, slightly echoing off the tall buildings that lined the street beside, was the only sound I could hear. Utter silence. I covered about half a block when I heard it, like a trumpet. A loud groaning boom echoed from above. White clouds of smoke gleamed overhead, covering every inch of the sky. I kept marching. Then the chill set in, subtle at first, but grew stronger with every step I took. Soon I could see my own breath, odd for a late July night. Then I could feel the cold, like walking into a meat freezer. Goosebumps on my skin, my hair stood upright. I crossed my arms in retaliation, but it kept coming. 1 block from my house now. I picked up a light jog as my limbs began to freeze. It kept decreasing in temperature. It had to be minus 30 Fahrenheit by now. I broke into a sprint as I approached my front door. Swinging it open, I stepped in, welcomed with a whoosh of warm air. I closed the door swiftly as crystals quickly formed on the window pane before me. I wasn't sure what exactly was going on. The temperature had dropped so quickly outside. I had a sinking feeling in my chest. Pulling my phone out of my pocket and checking, it was dead. My lights wouldn't turn on either. I want to guess EMP strike. But what about the cold air outside? Cryogenic warfare? I wondered if this was happening nationwide. What happened to just dropping a good old nuke and being done with things? Maybe this was more humane. Better freezing to death than have your skin boil off. Feeling the cold air beginning to make its way inside, I prepared, putting on all my winter clothes. Leggings, pants, snow pants, 2 layers of wool socks, snow boots, 3 layers of t-shirts, a sweater, winter gloves, and a heavy snow coat. I wrapped my face in scarves and put a wool hat on. My apartment had grown so cold I could feel my eyes freezing. I put on some snowboarding goggles I had in the closet. It wasn't enough. Boozer. My cat was meowing incessantly as she paced between my legs. I picked her up and shoved her into my jacket close to my chest. Zipping it up, she began to vibrate like a little heater. My neighbor had a fireplace, and I knew they had left town weeks ago. I am going to have to go over there. Bracing myself, I busted out of my front door into the winter-like atmosphere. This was beyond any January night I had ever experienced. Immediately, I was sapped of any heat I had retained under my heavy clothing, as if I had just plunged into a frozen lake. I quickly made my way to the neighbor's door, only to find it locked. In a moment of desperation, I backed up and threw myself at the door. It gave way in the first blow, with a loud splintering crack. I fell to the floor, landing on my side in their vacant hallway. Collecting myself, I stood up and found my way to their fireplace, my hands now shaking with frozen nerve damage. I stacked a crude kindling pile in the center of the pit. I had no lighter. Clambering around their fireplace, I found a box of matches. There were 5 left in the container, each coated with a fresh layer of frost. I attempted to strike every single one, only finding redemption in the last stick. I shakily held it to the kindling pile, praying it would not go out. Flame climbing up the short shaft of the match, nearly reaching my finger. Then, the stack of thinwood took flame. Quickly hovering over it with protective instinct a mother would have over a newborn infant, I began holding my rigid fingers over it, the flames wrapping around my hands and dancing between my digits. I was able to feel again. The warmth was barely enough to thaw my extremities. Quickly burning through the small pile of logs beside the fire, I began breaking down with furniture to keep the fire going. Every time I left the presence of the flames to gather more kindling, my body went numb. It was about 3 a.m. when I consumed every flammable item in the apartment and stacked my reserves next to the fireplace. It was enough for the night. I jammed as many books and pieces as was possible into fire, curled up next to it with about 4 blankets atop me, and fell asleep. I woke about 3 hours later to a small, smoldering pile of ash and my breath freezing in the air. I quickly stacked the rest of my kindling atop the embers and began thinking of a game plan. I have no vehicle. Leaving this heat source leads to a bone-chilling death. I have no fuel left. I have about an hour. With every minute I sat there, I began brainstorming with the precious time dwindling. I resided about 2 miles from a small hospital. If anything was still functioning, if anyone was still alive out there, that's where I would find them. Maybe the oil heaters were still functioning, and I would be welcomed by the warm embrace of doctors and nurses. Doubtful. I was certain a few people left in this city had begun looking out for themselves long ago, but still, it was worth a shot. It was my only shot. I began thinking of the fastest route there. If I cut through a few alleyways and backyards, I could half the distance to get there. With the fire already dying out again, I had to get moving before I had no warmth to work with. I pulled the collar of my jacket forward to find my cat, still peacefully resting inside. She looked up at me and blinked slowly. She was keeping my chest warm. I needed her just as much as she needed me. I thought of grabbing some quick supplies, but everything was frozen, of course. I hadn't eaten or drank anything since yesterday, and was starting to feel its effects weigh on me. I grabbed the blankets I had spent the night with and hung them around my shoulders like a cape. A little added warmth might be what gets me there in one piece. It was time. I approached the front door that was now sealed shut with frost. This is how I die, I thought. Slamming my shoulder into the door, it did not budge. I collected myself and went running at the door, slamming into it even harder. The frost sealed me and gave way, allowing the door to open about an inch. I could feel the tundra air wafting in to the already freezing hallway. I grabbed a metal leg from a table I had torn apart the night before. Using an prying motion, I jammed it into the doorway and heaved. The door budged a little more. I was like a man trying to tear into his own coffin. I grabbed the door, and it seemed to have some give now. Creaking and groaning, I opened it enough to slip outside. There was a haze in the air like morning fog. There was no snow on the ground. Instead, a layer of grayish soot covered everything. And as I took my first few steps, it puffed up into the air, causing my boots to be covered in the stuff. I picked up a hustled jog as I began my route to the hospital, slipping down my first alleyway, numbness already joining me, beginning at my toes and hands. Another alleyway, then a backyard, the tingling feeling climbing up my arms and legs. Not a soul in sight. A dog lay curled up beside a building covered in the dust. It did not move. I kept jogging, my muscles screaming in pain from the cold. It felt like I had cramps all over my body. Halfway there now. I bolted down another alleyway and then a street. A Volkswagen sat stationary at an intersection. I could see 2 people in the front seat hugging each other. As I got closer, I noticed they weren't moving. I shuddered. The thought of that being me very soon shook me to my core. My body was now beyond freezing. I lost all feeling in my hands. I couldn't even make a fist anymore. My feet felt like they were my own, as each foot I put in front of the other was now a guided act that I had no control over. I rounded the final turn, my jog turning into a drudgingly slow walk as my body and joints began to seize. My lungs burning with each and every inhale of chilling air I took in. The hospital stood before me, 1 story tall and made of brick with few windows. It looked like a little prison, a prison with 1 light on, coming from the basement window flickering away. I was ignited with hope again, swinging 1 leg in front of the other. I covered the stretch of road and then the sidewalk. Approaching the front doors, I could barely wrap my hand around the handle. Tried as I might, it did not open. They were locked, of course. Before I left, I thought about this. My game plan would be go around back or climb into a window, but I didn't have energy anymore. I was frozen. My body was slipping into a catatonic state. I underestimated the severity of this cryogenic frost that befell the city. My legs buckled and I collapsed, knees slamming into the concrete, but my pain receptors were unable to pick up the signal. Then I fell to my side, the soot engulfing me in a cloud of dust that I choked on, my body refusing to move anymore. Well, not the worst way to go. Could have been shittier, I thought. The numbness is all but reached my chest, where my cat was still laying. She let out a meek meow. The last thoughts I had were of my family, my parents, and if they're still alive. My brother and his family, were they okay? I hadn't called any of them in weeks. I had grown distant over the past few months. The stress of all that was going on, I had isolated myself. My cat adjusted under my stiff coat. She was going to freeze with the rest of me. I closed my eyes for the last time, listening to silence all around me, soaking it in, a sweet melody. The only thing that the cold couldn't steal. My body began shutting down. I kept listening. The silence was so comforting and warm. No sirens, no traffic or honking, planes taking off or landing. Just utter silence and the sound of the hospital doors swinging open. Story 6. I fell in love with a nice guy. Things were going well until I found a locked room in his house. We met at the National Gallery, which was holding a special exhibit displaying music from around the world. Do you play? I spun around, startled by the sudden presence of a stranger by my side, and came face to face with a pair of deep brown eyes, dark and unblinking. What? I backed up slightly. Music. I noticed you were looking at that for a while. He motioned toward the instrument behind the glass viewing box. Oh, yeah, I turned toward the exhibit, then back at him. I mean, no, not that. That's like a sitar or something. But yes, I played a bunch of instruments growing up. I did a degree in classical music, actually, but I mostly just teach piano now. Anyway, what about you? I finally noticed my babbling enough to cut myself off. I couldn't help it. There was just something about him. He had a natural presence unlike anyone I'd ever met before. And those lashes. Very long for a man. He laughed. No. I tried piano once. My teacher said I didn't have dexterity. He wiggled his fingers in my face, as if to demonstrate. Beams of ambient overhead lighting caught the silver rings on his fingers. Tasteful. Artsy. I noticed his outfit for the first time that night. A crisp black button-down. Sleeves rolled up to his elbows, bottom tucked into a pair of tailored trousers. Shiny loafers. Black leather trench draped over one arm. Here was a man with a wicked sense of style. And there it was, that shiver of electricity, the jolt of attraction that instantly tore down my walls. Maybe you just haven't found the right teacher. He smirked. I'd love to hear you play sometime. And that's how we ended up at my apartment that evening. Him drinking wine, one arm propped up against the top of my Yamaha piano, gazing down as my fingers danced across the keys. I was playing Chopin. He was mesmerized. I wish I could be as talented as you, he murmured as the piece drew to a close, and I lifted my hands from the keys. You could make it big, you know? You're good enough for the National Orchestra, or even headlining your own show someday. You're just as good as the concert pianist I saw last week, maybe better. Oh no, I couldn't. I laughed. It takes a lot of time and energy to do tours and perform every night, and I just don't have that in me. I'm probably not good enough anyways. I disagree. He took my hand in his, delicately rubbing my fingers. You have an amazing gift. His name was Adam. He had graduated university with 4 different bachelor's degrees and dabbled in different industries. As a scientist in computational cancer genomics, then as a software engineer at Google, then a blockchain security researcher in a crypto firm. By the time we met, he was a hedge fund manager and was on the board of several businesses he co-founded, as if that ambition wasn't enough. He was also a chess grandmaster and semi-pro tennis player on the side. And somehow, somewhere in between work and meetings and trainings and games, he carved out time for dates with me in his busy schedule. Little old me. Every date ended back in my apartment, with me serenading him on my piano, until, loosened and disoriented from the wine, we tumbled into my bed, the outside world shrinking to the rhythm of our breaths. He felt like a fantasy come to life. But even when a tiny, inconvenient part of me wondered what the catch was, the rest of me silenced it with a giddy flutter. One night, breathless and satiated, he cradled me tightly against his chest and murmured into my ear, "You're the most precious thing to me, you know that? Even more than your career and your tennis trophies." I teased, "This feels too good to be true." His thumb carefully traced the outline of my fingers. "You're unbelievable. You know how many girls dream of this? A successful guy that's also nice and attentive and loving? I can't believe you make time for me amongst everything." He lifted my hands up to his lips, planting big, sloppy kisses on each of my fingers in rapid succession, making me giggle in response. "Well, get used to it, sweetheart." He suddenly went still and serious. "Actually, I've had something on my mind. I'd like for you to move in with me. If you're ready, that is." I wasn't. We were 3 weeks in, and, as I realized in that moment, I hadn't even been over to his apartment before. He seemed to sense my apprehension and quickly sought to appease me. "No pressure. Maybe you should come over to mine for our next date. Check the place out. No strings attached. I promise." "Okay," I whispered, feeling slightly relieved. I felt his body relax under mine. He stroked my fingertips lovingly. "I can't wait." 3 days later, I found myself standing in the living room of his penthouse apartment, utterly slack-jawed. It was the nicest house I'd ever been in. So sleek and polished it felt almost like a showroom. The main room had an open-plan living space with a modern kitchen, a huge L-shaped couch, and a state-of-the-art entertainment system, all contained within floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A 35 **TH floor view. In the center of it all was a glass and stainless steel spiral staircase leading to the second floor. Right underneath the staircase, a brand new grand piano. "For you, my love. For our new life together," he'd said. The most impressive thing, though, was probably his extensive fine art collection. Paintings of every size and style and period adorned every wall. The grandest one being a huge Renaissance-style painting by the dining table. 6 feet by 3-4 feet, nestled in a thick, gilded gold frame. It featured a series of nude women clustered on a cobblestone path amid a lush gardenscape. God, it must have cost a fortune. I'd only seen paintings like this in museums. As he stood in the kitchen making us dinner and drinks, I took the opportunity to explore further. On the second floor was a series of doors lining a central corridor. 2 on the left, a guest bedroom and study room, and 1 on the right, master bedroom. The guest and master were identical. Same size, same walk-in wardrobe, same in-suite bathroom, same door next to the vanity. In the guest room it led directly into the study, but in the master bedroom, it was locked. Strange. I peered through the keyhole, but all I saw was a red glow emanating from within. Curious, I jangled the doorknob a second time and rapped lightly on the door, searching for something. I nearly jumped out of my skin at his sudden appearance behind me. He chuckled and handed me my cocktail glass. An olive bobbed around the bottom of the glass as I swirled a clear liquid, peering out at me, stretching and distorting as it moved. "What's in there?" I motioned toward the locked door. "Just a storage room." He took a sip of his drink. "Your storage room has red lighting?" I retorted. He set his glass on the vanity. "Dinner's almost ready." Why is he deflecting? "It feels like you're hiding something from me." "We can talk about this later." "Well, I'm here right now, and we're right by the door." He stared at me long and hard, then realized I wasn't going to budge. "Fine." He produced a small gold key on a belt chain, twisted in the lock, and opened the door. For a second, all I saw was red. Red floor, red walls, red ceiling. No windows. The same red foam tiles lined the walls and ceiling. Soundproofing. In the middle of the room was a contraption that almost looked like a dentist chair, but finished in rich black leather. On the extensions where it seemed one's arms and legs were supposed to lay, there were thick polished steel rings bolted into the structure, from which hung heavy leather straps with buckles and clasps. Lining one wall of the room were 2 large metal cupboards, and right above them was a series of framed portrait photographs, all of women I didn't recognize. For a moment, As I gazed upon one of the photographs, I felt a feeling of recognition I couldn't quite place. Just as quickly as he opened it, the door shut again. It's, for sex, he mumbled, his face taking on a ruddy flush. A sex chair. I dabble in BDSM. If you've heard of it. Look, I didn't want to scare you away, okay? I know it's a lot, and you were already hesitant to move in with me. I didn't want to scare you off. I didn't know when to tell you. Oh, and no, you don't have to use it, ever. Not now, not ever. I promise I won't pressure you. It's just a stupid chair. Now, please, can we please go downstairs and have dinner? Downstairs, the air was perfused with the rich, heady scent of cooked meat. A slab of steak rested atop a wire rack, dripping with fat and juice. Oily brown liquid pooled in the tray beneath. He pulled the roasted vegetables from the oven next. Potatoes and asparagus, lightly charred, sizzling and popping in the pan. The smell of butter clouded the air, moist and cloying. I didn't know you could cook. The meat squelched as his knife cleaved through it. Dark liquid stained the wooden chopping block. He smiled, seemingly relieved I wasn't bringing up the red room, always cut against the grain. I learned it from a friend. It's like second nature now. Perched gingerly on a stool across the kitchen island, I nervously watched him carve the meat. In any other circumstance, this would have been romantic. Sexy, even. Now, the vicious dissection before me filled my gut with a queasy premonition. It occurred to me for the first time in weeks that I barely knew him. I didn't know about the kink. I didn't know about the cooking. I was sitting in a stranger's kitchen, in a stranger's house. It was like the air had been instantly sucked out of the room. A chill ran up my legs. Suddenly, the luxurious finishings felt cold, the paintings lifeless, the cavernous space foreboding and ominous. But that's when I noticed it. The large Renaissance painting from earlier, the one with the nude women. In the middle of the cluster, a woman was sat on the ground, playing chess. She had short, dark, curly hair, deep dimples, and a mole on her left cheek. I had seen her before. Even when painted in the Renaissance style, it was unmistakable. That mole, those dimples, the roundness of her cheeks. I'd just seen a real-life photograph of her, framed and hanging in the locked room upstairs. How is it? I looked down at my plate and hastily stuffed a piece of asparagus into my mouth. Great. His eyes studied my face carefully. Then he nodded and went back to his meal. From my seat at the dining table, I could see the large Renaissance painting looming behind him. I counted the women, 10 in total. Did I tell you after high school I went traveling? He seemed to be trying to break the uneasy atmosphere. I backpacked all over Asia. Mumbai, Bali, Singapore, Hanoi. I even spent a week in China. You ever been to China? No, I mumbled. I'm pretty sure there were also 10 portraits upstairs. He speared a potato with his knife, gesturing it about as he spoke. I'll bring you along someday. China's great. When I was in Hangzhou, I went to a TCM museum, traditional Chinese medicine. He paused for a second, then lowered his voice and continued, slower than before. Did you know that in TCM they believe the appearance of foods can determine their health benefits? I shook my head feebly. Okay, sure, they could just be art. But why have photos of random women in a sex room? And who even are these women? Take a walnut, for example. He leaned forward in his chair, a glint in his eyes. A walnut looks just like a brain. So, for centuries, TCM practitioners believed eating walnuts would nourish our brains, way before modern science proved the same. Isn't that crazy? And yet, so simple, so intuitive, so smart. The women in the painting all seem to be taking part in a different activity from the others. At one end, a curvy blonde carried a bundle of bread and fruit. You can learn so much while traveling. After Asia, I flew to South America Dash. At the other, a petite brunette held a leather drawstring pouch brimming with coins, and went on this crazy 3-day ayahuasca retreat down in Brazil. The tallest woman stared down at a parchment scroll, intently scribing equations. I met a shaman, or maybe I hallucinated him. I don't know. Every living being has a soul and essence, he said. In consciousness, your essence flows through your blood. The line of women started from the leftmost edge of the painting, and ended somewhere near the center. The right half only had the background painted in. Really makes you think, doesn't it? For centuries, cultures all around the world obsessed over the connection between our food, our bodies, and our souls. And what did we come up with over here? He chuckled, shoving another forkful of steak into his mouth. He was chewing with his mouth open, his teeth gnashed together, tearing at the sinewy flesh. Red juices dribbled from the corner of his lips. Then again, you know what they say, all at once. He seemed to be growing infinitesimally small, the table stretching out for miles in between us. I blinked. The ceiling grew taller, then compressed, then disappeared altogether. The Renaissance painting warped as the walls twisted and spun around the women's distorted faces. I stopped chewing. The potatoes felt cold and starchy between my teeth. You are what you eat. My heart sank, and the floor gave in beneath my feet. I blinked awake, groggy, dizzy and confused. My nose twitched uncomfortably. The air smelled faintly sterile and metallic. I tried to rub my eyes, but my arms, heavy and unresponsive, wouldn't obey. As my eyes finally adjusted to the light, I realized I was back in the red room, lying with my back against a leather chair, arms and legs bound tightly to the chair by restraints. My head, too, was held firmly in place. I could taste the rubber of the gag in my mouth. In an instant, the events of the night came rushing back to me. The drinks, the room, the women, the cooking, the awkward dinner, the dinner. Shit, he must have put something in the food. Almost as if on cue, the door creaked open. Good, you're awake. We can finally begin. The door locked shut behind him. There was a sound of squeaky wheels on tile and metal clanging against metal. He finally came into my field of vision. He was wearing surgical scrubs and pushing a little metal trolley. On it, an assortment of instruments lay polished and gleaming in the lamplight. Scalpels, forceps, scissors, retractors, pliers, the saw. I was on the butcher's block, and there was nowhere to run. The panic and desperation that followed was too much to bear. I tugged at the restraints, but they were done up so tightly I could feel them eating into my skin. You know, it'll go a lot easier if you just cooperated. Oh, but I know you girls always so feisty. He turned to me with a knowing smirk and caught me glancing up towards the portraits on the wall. No, you aren't the first. He snapped on a pair of surgical gloves. The dizzying smell of alcohol suffocated the air as he began sterilizing the tools. A cold, hard knot solidified in my gut, twisting tighter with each frantic tug I gave to the restraints. They were all once overlooked. He threw me a pitiful glance. Like you? But then they got to be part of something bigger than themselves. Better. Now, they are celebrated, admired, embraced. Now, their gifts can't be ignored. I started pulling at the restraints more violently, but the more I thrashed in the seat, the tighter the restraints felt. I could feel my skin burning from the friction. Tears pricked at my eyes. He sighed in the face of my resistance. Let's face it, your talents are wasted on being a music teacher. I can make something of your gifts, put you on a real stage, sell albums. You'll finally be recognized. We will be something great. You'll see. He slid a rolling metal stool out of one of the large cupboards and came to sit by me. He brushed stray strands of hair away from my face and caressed my cheek. All I felt was revulsion. Don't be scared, he murmured softly in my ear. I'll take good care of you. I felt the sting of something sharp pressing lightly against my left wrist. I squeezed my eyes shut. Tears trickled down my cheeks, intermingling with beads of sweat. I held my breath. Then the saw began slicing into my wrist. The pain was unlike anything I'd ever felt before. The saw chewed through muscle and sinew, 1,000 sharp metal teeth catching, pulling then tearing through my flesh. It felt like my hand was on fire. Every forward and backward stroke of blade ignited every nerve ending in my wrist, sending jolts of blinding, white-hot pain radiating up my arm. A raw, primal scream clawed its way up my throat. I barely recognized my own voice. Blood gushed from the wound, a hot, slick torrent that dripped rhythmically into a plastic bucket below. I sobbed and writhed and begged for mercy, but he just kept going. Back and forth the blade went shredding through me. Then he hit bone. The high-pitched shriek of metal on bone was deafening. Even to the agonizing pain and delirium, I still heard every horrific note. He stood up at this point to get more leverage. Bone crunched and splintered under his weight as he dragged the saw back and forth, grunting and wheezing, a labor of love. All I could do was scream. I must have passed out several times from the excruciating pain, but eventually I awoke to him placing my second hand into a cooler, right next to first. Viscous blood droplets kissed a fresh bed of ice cubes below, delicately spiderwebbing outwards across their slick surfaces. I clenched and unclenched my hands. I felt them grasp at the air, but when I looked down there was nothing there. He inserted a cannula in my arm. Exhausted, I didn't protest. He pulled the chair back in and sat by my side, watching as dark red blood fill up the clear tube and dripped into a bag. E was my first, he smiled wistfully. She was on the swim team in college, had real talent, great lung capacity, which I lacked. But then I heard she was quitting swimming to focus on some other shit. Imagine wasting all that natural talent. I thought, if you're not using it, then I will. So I took her lungs and ribs, and I ate them. Oh my God! I stifled a sob. Nausea bubbled in my gut. My hands were his dinner. And I became a better swimmer, he grinned, patting his ribcage proudly. I was surprised it actually worked. Those TCM idiots have been eating walnuts for centuries when they could have been doing this. Though, of course, it took until Carly for me to realize I had to drink all the blood tube to complete the transfer. It's much more effective that way, just like what the shaman said. My vision was starting to go hazy. I'd already lost so much blood. He seemed to notice I was fading too, and leaned down closer to my face. See you soon, sweetheart, he whispered. I can't wait for all that we'll achieve together. I live in a house with too many people. I can't hear them or see them, but I know, like me, they're very much alive. In his hands I find solace. I slot right into them. We play fugues and etudes and nocturnes. My fingers dance over the keys like it's second nature. I hate that he was right. Where I thought I couldn't make it before. Where I thought I wasn't good enough. He simply waltzed in and demanded to be seen and heard. He has a successful music YouTube channel now. He's done several guest appearances in National Symphony concerts. He released an album. Could I have done it all along? Would I have garnered the same trust and attention as quickly as he had? Did I ever want to asterisk? Asterisk. We are his hands, his legs, his tongue, his ribs, his brain. We are his talents, his art, his successes, his accolades. But as far as the world is concerned, he is the ultimate Renaissance man. Story 7. There's someone under the bed pretending to be my daughter. I used to think kids just had wild imaginations. Monsters in the closet. Shadows at the window. Whispers in the dark. Normal fears. Things you grow out of once the world shows you it's not all that magical or all that scary. I don't think that anymore. My daughter, Eva, was always a bright, happy child. A little shy, maybe, but deeply curious. She loved books, bugs, and building block towers taller than she was. At 6, she still needed a nightlight, still gripped my hand a bit too tightly when we walked past the basement door. She was always afraid of the dark, but it started with whispers. One night last month, I heard her talking in her room. It was past 10. I figured she was reading out loud to her stuffed animals again. I pushed the door open. Eva, I whispered. She turned toward me slowly, too slowly. The way she moved didn't feel right. I'm fine, Daddy, she said. Her voice was flat. Wrong. I walked closer, a cold prickle crawling up my spine. Who were you talking to? She blinked. No one. Her room was empty. I looked in the closet, under the bed. Nothing. She watched me the whole time. Not scared. not confused, just watching, like she was observing me, studying me. I didn't sleep that night. The next week, things got worse. I heard footsteps running down the hallway in the middle of the night, light like a child's, but too fast. Much too fast, and the house started to smell off, like damp earth, like something rotting behind the walls. One night, I found Eva sitting on the hallway floor at 3 a.m., whispering something over and over. I knelt beside her. "Sweetheart, what are you doing?" "Don't listen to her, Daddy. She lies." She looked up at me, her eyes wide and filled with tears. I scooped her up and carried her back to bed. She curled up tight, pulling the covers up to her chin, and whispered, "There's someone under the bed pretending to be me." My blood turned to ice. I dropped to my knees and looked. Nothing. The next morning, I found Eve at the breakfast table, humming to herself and smiling, like nothing had happened. I asked her about the night before. She looked confused. "What do you mean?" "I slept all night." "You don't remember sitting in the hallway?" She shook her head. "Did I sleepwalk again?" "Maybe. She used to sleepwalk when she was younger." That night, I set up my old baby cam in her room, one with video, just in case. At 2:47 a.m., the baby cam clicked on. Motion. I looked at the screen. Eva sat up in bed. Her eyes were closed. She was whispering, and then she answered herself. Another voice, coming from somewhere nearby, low, guttural, like it was trying to sound like her, but couldn't quite get it right. I ran to her room, heart pounding. She was asleep. I checked under the bed. Still nothing. I told myself it was interference, a glitch in the audio, maybe, but I kept the monitor on the next night. And the one after that, the whispers didn't stop. Then came the night everything changed. The storm was violent, thunder shaking the windows. Eva came into my room, trembling. "Daddy, please." "She's back." I sat up fast. "Who, sweetheart?" "The one under the bed." She looked at me, her lips quivering. My skin crawled. "Okay," I said, "let's go check." She gripped my hand so tightly it hurt. When we reached her room, I saw her, Eva, lying in bed, sleeping, but also somehow standing right beside me. I froze. "What the hell?" I whispered. "Eva," the one holding my hand squeezed tighter. "That's not me." And then the thing in the bed opened its eyes. It stared at me, unblinking. Then it smiled. A wide, unnatural smile, too wide, stretching almost to its ears. The thing that looked like Eva sat up. It didn't speak out loud, but I heard it anyway, in my head. A voice like shattering glass and grinding teeth. "You see me now." I grabbed the real Eva. God, I prayed she was a real one, and I ran as far as I could. We spent the rest of the night in a motel. The next morning, I went back to the house alone. It was empty. Eva's bed was made, her toys untouched. Her room smelled of dirt and mold. I checked the baby monitor footage. It showed me tucking her into bed. But on the video, I was smiling. That same too wide smile. I didn't know what to think. Was I losing my mind? I called a child psychologist. They recommended evaluations, play therapy, the usual routine. But I wasn't imagining what I saw. I know I wasn't. I took Eva to my sister's place 2 towns over. I didn't tell her everything. Just said we were in trouble and needed somewhere to stay. For a few days, things were fine. Then Eva started to draw. Dozens of pictures. All of her bedroom. The same scene, over and over. Her, asleep, while another Eva crawled out from under bed, with eyes black as coal and mouth open too wide. One picture was different. One drawing showed me standing at the foot of her bed. Only it wasn't me. My eyes were hollow, empty sockets, and something long and thin was crawling out of my mouth. I gently confronted her. "Sweetheart, why are you drawing this?" She didn't answer right away. Then she whispered, "Because she's coming." "Who is?" She looked at me. She says she's me, but she's not. She says she wants to be real. She says I took her place. I stared at her. Took her place? What does that mean? Eva's eyes filled with tears. She says she was the one who was supposed to be born, but something went wrong. She says I'm the mistake. A chill ran through me. I went online. Deep forums, hidden threads, encrypted subreddits, places people only whisper about. That's where I found it. One post. Just a single sentence. There's someone under the bed pretending to be me. And the comments below. Don't let them touch you. They learn by watching. The first isn't always a real one. Never trust the one who smiles. I ran back to my sister's house. Eva was gone. My sister was lying in the hallway, still breathing but cold, like something had drained the life out of her. The front door was wide open. Wet footprints marked the wooden floor. Small, bare, they went down the steps, out into the street, toward the woods. I ran. Branches scraped my face. The forest was too quiet. No wind, no insects, nothing. Then I saw her, a small figure, crouched, rocking back and forth. Eva, I shouted. She turned to me. She was crying. Daddy, she sobbed. Help me. She's gonna take me. I ran to her and wrapped my arms around her. It's okay, I whispered. I've got you. You're safe. She looked up at me, and then her face changed. The tears stopped. Her mouth curled into a smile. Too wide. From somewhere behind me, the real Eva screamed. I turned, just in time to see her crawling out from beneath the twisted roots of an old tree, mud and dead leaves stuck to her skin. Daddy, she cried. That's not me. I looked between them. Two identical girls. One smiling, the other crying. One filthy and shaking, the other calm and grinning. I had seconds. I turned to the smiling one. What's your favorite bedtime story? I asked. She blinked. The one about the wolf. She smiled wider. Wrong. I said. Her answer couldn't be further from the truth. I turned and ran to the crying Eva. She threw her arms around me. The other one let out a shriek. High-pitched, inhuman. She dropped to all fours and sprinted back toward the roots. The ground shook. The tree opened like a mouth, and it swallowed her whole. We left that night. We burned the house down. Never looked back. I had no explanation for everything that had happened these past few weeks, and that scared me. After all of this, what mattered to me was that I had Eva by my side, safe and sound. A few weeks passed, and everything returned to normal, or at least that's how it seemed. I still couldn't stop thinking about everything that had happened. Sometimes, Eva still wakes up screaming. She says someone's standing in the corner of her room. She says it's still watching. She says it's still learning. Tonight, I woke up in the middle of the night and heard Eva whispering to herself again. Only this time, she was smiling. Story 8. I'm a Shinto priestess. An unnatural silence is consuming my shrine, and I think it's a shadow of the Yanamori hum. For 22 years, the sound of the ocean has been the baseline of my life. I am a priestess at a small shrine on the coast of Oita, and the waves are our oldest prayer. They are constant, eternal. At least they were. 3 weeks ago, I was walking the path to the cliffs when, for 17 seconds, the ocean went silent. It wasn't that the waves stopped. I could see them crashing on the rocks below. They just made no sound. That was the first time. It was not the last. My name is Akari. My world is and has always been built of sound. The gentle splash of water at the Shizuya, where visitors purify their hands. The sharp clap of a prayer. The deep, resonant chime of the main bell. The rustle of the wind through the sacred camphor tree. These are the sounds of peace, of order. The silence came for them one by one. After it took the ocean, it crept into the shrine grounds. The row of bronze fear and wind chimes my grandmother hung fell still. I'd watch them in a strong sea breeze, swaying violently on their strings, yet producing no sound at all. It was like watching a memory of a sound, an echo in reverse. The silence had an unnerving quality. It wasn't just quiet, it was a void. A patch of it would feel cold, the air thin and dead. I tried to fight it. I performed the Oharai purification rites, waving the Onusa wand, chanting the ancient words meant to dispel impurities. The silence consumed my prayers. My voice would leave my lips and simply vanish, never reaching the air. The act felt hollow, meaningless. My faith, for the first time in my life, had no purchase. Desperate, I turned to the shrine's kamanjo, the records kept by generations of my ancestors. I spent days with the fragile, insect-eaten scrolls, searching for any mention of such a phenomenon. I found it in a text from the Edo period. A priest described it as silent plague, a spreading stillness that caused a coldness in the soul and was a harbinger of madness. He gave it a name, the shinen, the death sound. The text noted that the elders of that time blamed the phenomenon on the mountains to the west, a range they called, with great fear, Nijika-yama, the crying mountain. The account was dismissed by the next generation as folklore. Tonight, the shinen came for the heart of the shrine. During evening prayers, it seeped into the Hayden, the hall of worship. It flowed like mist across the tatama mats. The candle flames flickered but made no sound. The scent of incense was still there, but the crackle of it burning was gone. I stood before the altar, my hand trembling as I raised my kagura, Suzu, the sacred bells used to call the kami. I shook them, and there was nothing. I saw the cluster of bells vibrate wildly. I felt the familiar weight of them in my hand, but there was only the oppressive, dead vacuum of the shinen. In that moment, the order of my world shattered. This was not a spirit to be placated. It was an absence, a hunger. I don't know what moved me. It was an instinct born of pure terror. The scroll said it was a harbinger of madness from the crying mountain, and I thought, what if the madness comes from fighting it? What if you can't fill a void, you can only refuse to feed it? I dropped the bells, knelt on the wood, and did the one thing that went against my every instinct. I didn't chant. I didn't pray. I emptied my mind, controlled my breathing, and offered it my own silence. I met its void with my own. It felt like holding my breath underwater. A crushing pressure built around me, a profound cold that seeped into my bones. But after a long, terrifying moment, the presence receded. It pulled back from the Hayden, and the first sound I heard was a frantic, ragged gasp of my own breath. It's 11:52 p.m. now. The silence has retreated to the edges of the shrine grounds. For now, in the aftermath, shaking, I did what my ancestors couldn't. I opened my laptop. I searched for Nijiku-yama, for Oita Crying Mountain, for sound phenomenon, and I found a post on this very forum. It was written by a sound engineer. He wrote about a village called Yanamori, nestled in the mountains. He wrote about a maddening 43 hertz hum, an infection sound he called the Kansanon. He wrote about a compulsion, a cave, and his escape to a hotel in Beppu. My blood went cold. Beppu is the city down the coast from me. His infection sound, my death sound, are not two different phenomena. They are two sides of the same horror. He heard the mountain's voice. I am being consumed by its shadow. He was pulled toward a cave. I am being erased in my own home. So I am writing this. This is not a confession or a plea for help. It is a warning, and it is a message. To the sound engineer in Beppu, you are not going crazy, and you did not escape. You only heard half of the song. I have heard the other half. The entity in that mountain does not just scream. It also listens, and I think I'm beginning to understand what it wants. Story 9. My wife and I have been getting gifts that aren't on our wedding registry. We had been together for 7 years when I finally gathered the courage to propose. It was everything I'd hoped for, and then some. But things started to turn odd after we had set the date for our small wedding and set up our registry with all the usual items, along with some nice-to-haves. A cardboard package wrapped in a neat pink bow began to arrive every week in the run-up to our wedding. At first, they were non-threatening enough, even if still very strange. The first contained a single Polaroid photo of my wife and me taken years prior. We remembered when and where it had been taken immediately, but why exactly somebody had gone to the trouble of scrolling far down my Facebook wall to find it and send it to us, we couldn't explain. Well, that's fucking creepy, my wife retorted. Yeah, was all I managed to reply with before trailing off as I stared at the photo. We had been too busy to concern ourselves over it too much, but then the next package arrived. It was another photo of us, and this time, it was one I knew neither of us had shared with the outside world. No Facebook post, no text to mom, nothing. It wasn't even on my phone anymore, but again, we both remembered taking it because neither of us could forget that sunset. It was the first time we said, "I love you" to each other, against a backdrop of sky lathered in shades of orange and red as day gave way to night. How could either of us forget? Our lack of concern suddenly spiraled into me trying and failing to lay Bella's panic through an exterior of faux confidence. I was rattled too, but two fearful people playing off each other wouldn't have gone down well. After talking things through, we decided to file a police report. It was a silly idea, even at the time, given the complete lack of evidence that whoever was sending these had malicious intentions, but getting ahead of the situation couldn't hurt. Bella needed something to put her mind at reluctant ease. 3 days after filing the report, the third package was left on our doorstep. By this point, we'd figured out the weekly pattern and decided to call into our respective workplaces to let them know we'd be running a little late that morning. But, as if in tune with our very thoughts themselves, the package was already waiting for us when we woke up. None of our attempts at catching the perpetrator worked in the future, either. The package just appeared somewhere we hadn't been watching. The bow tie had become a little tattered, a little less pink, like it was losing the joy it was supposed to signify. A more recent photo lay inside this one, dated maybe a few months ago, except it wasn't a photo either of us had taken. We'd never been to the city in the background. There wasn't much Bella could do at this point except cry in a blend of confusion and fear each time a new package showed up as I shrouded my own unease to tend to her. Places we'd never been to, kisses we'd never shared, meals we'd never eaten. There were stacks of photos in each package past a third, all depicting a life we had never lived. I wanted to stop opening them, but I could never manage it. Bella insisted we find out what lay within each, as if she found some sense of comfort beyond the fear that the flashes of this other life struck within her. The final package arrived yesterday. The photos inside were what we had come to expect, except the last one, tucked away at the bottom and concealed under a vignette of supposedly happy moments. It was of Bella, lying on our living room floor, arms and legs twisted in stomach-wrenching fashion. Sunlight crept through a corner of the window and bounced against a bloodied knife plunged into her chest. And off in the corner, far away enough to allow the horrifying central scene to remain the focus, but visible enough to catch my gaze, was a figure, somehow initially obscured by darkness enough to make it look like a blank canvas of a human, before revealing itself over the course of a few seconds. It was me. I turned to Bella, blood tinged with terror sloshing in my eardrums, and she was gone. The space she had been standing in mere moments before was now vacant. Some part of me knew where she was, and I crept across the cold floor to the living room with all the technique of somebody who had forgotten how to walk before setting my eyes upon my worst fear. That same scene. Bella, devoid of life, of everything that made her, her. And as I stood in that corner, fulfilling the sick prophecy that had been bestowed upon me, the familiar click of a photo being taken from parts unknown broke the silence that had blanketed my surroundings. I thought better my first instinct. Calling the police again, given whatever lay in front of me was now self-incriminating. How do you convince people of the truth when all the evidence testifies against you? When Father Time himself testifies against you. I don't even know what the truth is myself. All I do know is that I had nothing to do with whatever happened to my Bella. And now, with a heart shattered through sorrow and grief and a mind brimming with primal fear, I'm condemned to a life on the run. A life of not knowing what. Not knowing why. Story 10. Have you seen them too? I remember the first time I saw one of them, he said. His far-off gaze told me that this new patient was lost deep in his own thoughts. I could tell something was off, because even though his head didn't move, his eyes followed me wherever I went. Followed you how? I inquired. Well, not really, like he wasn't actually looking at me, but the man trailed off for a moment as if he was trying to put his thoughts into words. I knew he was, you know? I did know. This was textbook paranoia as far as I was concerned. It's important that you learn to separate delusion from reality, John. I said, I know, but this time it felt so real. Other times it felt like a dream, but it felt so real, said John, his shoulders slumped and gaze turned downward. That was only the beginning though, wasn't John? Yeah, it got so much worse. I felt like everyone was looking at me all the time, even when no one was around. I scribbled something on my notepad. So you felt like you were being watched? All the time, John replied. Well, that is typical of someone with your condition. Has the clozapine done you any good? Not really. There is an experimental treatment from Switzerland that I think might just do the trick for you. I stood up to get my prescription pad, to write out the new prescription for my patient. John looked over to where I had left my notepad. Name, John redacted. Diagnosis, paranoid personality. Institutionalized, not recommended. Notes, ideal subject. Right, I said as I sat back in my chair. 1 tablet twice daily, breakfast and dinner. With that, I stood up and strode purposefully toward the door. The following week, as I entered the room in which the now disheveled John redacted sat, I could tell something had definitely happened. I killed one of them, the ragged man stated, as though it was merely idle chit-chat. I beg your pardon, you what? I said, still standing in front of my chair. I killed one. It's okay. They're not human, not like you and I, John said. They look like us, and they want us to think they're like us. But I've seen what they do when they think no one is watching. As the silence began to drag on between us, John spoke up again. I found out what they really are. And what is that? I asked, now very aware that John was sat in the perfect position to block me from getting to the door. Robots. Doctor, they have been replaced. The one I killed looked like my neighbor, but he was just a robot, all full of wires and machine parts. John, I need you to realize that this isn't real. People aren't being replaced by machines. That's what my neighbor said, but I didn't care. He wasn't really my neighbor, just one of those things, so I had to take him apart. He is still hanging from a hook in my barn. I noticed the first time the brown stains around the cuffs of John's sleeves and spattered across his shirt. I took all the pieces out. It was a bit messy, but I was right. He was made of metal. I could smell it. John, I think we should wrap up our visit here, okay? I wanted nothing more than to run to a neighboring office, lock the door and call police. But I knew that John was faster and stronger than me. I would have to be very careful not to alert John as to my intentions. For now, I would have to settle for keeping my eyes fixed on the burly, blood-covered farmer. Why are you staring at me? John asked. I didn't have a good answer that wouldn't worsen the situation, so I merely stammered. I'm not staring, just focus on our conversation. You're looking at me like my neighbor did. John slowly got his feet and began to take careful, measured steps towards me. That was the breaking point. I had backed up to the large window at the back of my office. I threw myself with all my might at the window, which shattered, sending shards of glass flying out into the garden at the back of the ward. I got to my feet and began running. Behind me, I could hear the large man's feet pounding against the ground, getting closer and closer. I got to the street, John close on my heels. As I got to the other side of the street, narrowly avoiding a car, I heard a loud thud, and then a moment later, a second quieter thud. I turned around to see John lying unconscious and bleeding on the road. I ran to the payphone at the corner of the street and called for an ambulance. I didn't leave my house for a few days after that. I began taking medication that came highly recommended by my ward's benefactors. When I finally did go out, I couldn't help but notice that everyone was staring at me. I tried to ignore them, but no matter where I went, they always watched me. I struggled to return to normal after my last meeting with John, and eventually I did make a return to some semblance of normal. All that went out the window when I heard the mechanical hum of my assistant walking by. I tried to reason that it must have been something else making the sound, but as time went on, more and more the people I talked to seemed a little less human and a little more machine. I could see them everywhere I went. I could see them when I looked at the faces of my friends and the passers-by on the street. They had all been replaced. None of them were human anymore. Have you seen them too?